If you are tuning in live, we are very happy to have you here. If you are watching in the replay, thank you for checking out our channel. Make sure to check out all the cool playlists that we have set up, or maybe check out some of the replays of our previous stuff. We have cool like star seed gatherings and stuff here on Sunday, and then we do a nightly podcast where we really just interact with random various people, and sometimes we're doing meditations, and other times we're just talking about various different things that have to do with consciousness. So we're super happy to have you here. My co-host Aaron is not quite here yet. He will be here very shortly. And we have my friend Will Graham on the show tonight, who has spent a lot of time in Peru, and he spent some time in the military. And by Peru, I mean like the Amazon jungle. He spent a lot of time with tribes down there, learning about himself, utilizing plant medicines, learning how to use them to help other people and himself. And he learned a lot about himself and life in the process. And we're happy to have him on the show tonight and see basically what he has to say about life. And if you have any questions for him, then we would be more than, or for us, we'd be more than happy to answer them for you. Hello, Nina. It's very good to see you tonight. And Jacob, it is good to see you as well. How are you guys doing tonight? We are back around the same campfire we were last night, but we'll probably do something different. So we are really just waiting for everyone else to show up currently. I don't really have a plan besides them for the show, unless you guys... Hello, Charlotte. It is good to see you. We're just going to give it some time for everybody to kind of get in so that we don't jump off all crazy right away. Definitely, if you aren't already, check out the description of this video below, where we have links to basically all of our social media profiles, and you can follow us there, stay up to date on everything that we're doing. We are actually doing some really cool new stuff coming up, because I actually just got contacted by a nonprofit organization that's starting up right now that is basically looking to revolutionize the way that the standard person gets food in America, and actually make that something that is basically just delivered to your door if you want it. And there's certain grants and legislation that seems to be coming through the government, and we have certain private investors and basically people, charity fundraisers that are already in line to basically get the money that we do need in order to handle the logistics of this, and plenty of people that are already in the food trucking industry to help us out with that. And really at this point in time, we're looking to get in touch with farmers, food producers, ranchers, anybody who generates enough food that they're throwing some of it away. If they're doing this, we definitely need to talk to them. Please put them in contact with us, whether you are from the United States or not. This is a thing that if we manage to do what we're doing, it will revolutionize the way that the common man gets food, and it will set a new standard not only for the United States, but also for the world. And we really can change the way that the standard people get a healthy diet into their life, and make sure that that is something that is just a staple of the American household. Whether that's a household that makes plenty of money, or that's a household that makes no money at all, we would provide to you the food that you need directly from the farmers and the ranchers that are in your local areas, and ensure that that food is not going to waste, but instead is actually getting into your mouth so that you can enjoy it and you can get the nutritious benefits from it. The farmers of this country really do love what they do. They really do want to get the food that they are creating to the people so that those people can enjoy the food. That is really their mission. Our entire mission is to make sure that the people that need the food can get the food and enjoy it. So we're going to interlace with those farmers and producers perfectly so that we can get that food to you. This is a project that is going to take a lot of work. I'm not saying that this is going to happen tomorrow by any stretch of the imagination, but if you guys do know anybody who farms, ranches, produces food at any scale, or even works at large commercial scale in the food industry, or just food generation in general, or they work with projects like that, please put them in contact with us so that we can see if they can interface with our plan and we can set this new standard for the world. At this point in time, all we really need in order to be completely sovereign to ourselves is a place to stay, a place to get our information, and a place to get our food. If we have that food generated for us, and we already have the glory of the internet and places like the place that you're at right now, where we will be generating a place for you to get the information that you do need, or be able to point you in the way of that, whether it be for healing or just for education. We aim to change the way that education is done inside of the United States. We aim to change both of these things. And, you know, really honestly, like the whole real estate side of things is really just next, because when we have all of those in place, and those are something that in this country can be provided for you because you are a citizen of this country, then that is when we are in a place where we can choose to be who we really want to be, and we're not going to be under this kind of oppressive control that we really have been underneath up until this point. We are definitely in a position where we need to be making real changes for ourselves. We cannot be waiting on someone else to try and help us out. We've been waiting on someone else to help us out for a very long time. That time is quite a bit over. We are doing plenty of things, and we encourage you to take part in those things if you are here. Be the change you wish to see in the world. This is a quote by a great author. I believe it's Edward Abbey. Nevertheless, be that, do that, actually become the thing that you want to see. This place here is primarily here to provide a platform for minds to be the thing that they want to be. But we also do a lot of projects that are about really actually healing the problems that are in the world, whether they lie inside of your own psyche, they lie in the dynamics of your household, the way that you run your business, or the way that you get the things that you need in your life. And we really are working in all aspects to fill voids, to ensure that the quality of life in the United States of America is one that is at a higher level, because that is something that we can provide for our people if our people work together to provide it. And we are posturing to do just that. When we establish that, it will become the new standard of the world, and this will carry out everywhere, and this will realistically be something that you can be a part of and literally be a part of that change. As you see, there is not a lot of people right now. Not a lot of people watch these videos. Not a lot of people are actually doing the things that they need to do, and not a lot of people have come across the people that are actually doing things. This channel in and of itself is very much so an attempt for those kinds of people to get out and make sure that everybody is able to see how they're operating and see that they can get the help that they need. And we do that in many, many forums. I'm sorry for the super soapbox. I'm super passionate about this. I'm literally dedicating my life to it, and I have been dedicating my life to it for a long time. What I'm doing here is literally just one facet of a diamond that has been being cut forever. So I really appreciate you all being here. Again, food producers of any kind, ranchers, growers, anything, if they're doing it at a large scale, especially if they're having to get rid of food right now because they have nowhere to actually send it to, please put them in contact with us. I really appreciate you all being here. Kala, Willow, Nina, I'm glad that you are on board with that. I'm glad that you 100% agree. I agree that it is a wonderful project. Really, like, I mean, feel free to post on your social media platforms and just ask randomly if people that you know people that do this. You never know who you're going to end up knowing if you don't ask, and you might actually just know the exact right person. I had no idea who I was going to know when I asked today, and I actually ended up talking to the daughter of a person who's deeply integrated into the Wenatchee Valley, Washington pear industry, and they actually generate like 90% of the pears in the United States, and we're already getting in contact with them to work with that. So, like, I had no idea that this person knew anything about pear farming, but I just randomly asked, and you never know what's really going to be out there. But there really is, this really is a point in time in the world where, like, regardless of what you think is going on in the world, it does not matter. We can take control of the space that we already sit in. Possession is 9/10 of the law. You already own the land that you're sitting on. If you don't, for some reason, sell it away because you feel like you can't get food or you can't be safe there, it cannot be taken from you. If we actually work together to create the quality of life that we want, not by waiting for some kind of legislation to do it, not by waiting for someone else to do it, but by putting in the hours ourselves. We have so many man hours available to us where we spend time doing shit that does not even matter. I'm a very mindful and conscious person. I still waste like 8 hours of my day every day. So, like, realistically, we have the time, we have the things, we have the ability. We need to use the abilities to make sure that we are actually generating the change that we want to see in the world. I really appreciate you all dealing with my huge rant, but I hope that in many ways it inspires you to really want to do something. It doesn't matter whether it's a huge thing or it's a tiny thing, whether you're making one person's day or you're making a change that sweeps over the entire globe. Every single change that is positive are the pieces that make up the whole of the positive change in the long run. There is no scale at which you can interface with changing the world that is not beneficial. if you're moving the world towards the place that you want to see, and in my opinion, the place that is better, that is a place of unity, that is a place of coherence, of working together, caring about one another. If you're doing stuff to work towards that every single day, you're already doing something that changes the world. The world changes when everybody is changed, not when the world miraculously changes and then everybody changes on top of it. That's not really the way that it goes. I'm super glad that you agree. Let's seriously, let's get this party started, dude. I'm ready. I've been training for this my whole life, and I'm ready to go for the entire rest of my life. So, hi Lilac. Hello, beautiful souls, to everybody tuning into this now or later. Please, if you are not already, like, subscribe, listen to the first 10 minutes of this so that you can hear why there is a good reason to organize yourself around the things, the movement that we are making, which there's nobody trying to sit at the head of this movement. There's nobody trying to profit off of this movement. There's a bunch of people working together trying to make something happen, something that will be better for everyone. So it's just, if you want to take part, please take part. If you don't want to take part, sit back and watch the magic. Either way is fine. Live stream's here for you to do that. Please share your thoughts, disagreements or agreements. I really do not care. Everything that ever possibly comes through here is just going to give us an opportunity to make ourselves better and make sure that we're actually doing the things that we need to do. Uh, as far as giving the link to the nonprofit, and I appreciate that you'll share it immediately. I literally, I interacted with this group for a very short time where I could talk to them, get basically briefed on the situation that we're doing, and then they request my help because of the things that I know and the people that I've already worked with inside of there, and I just jump on board immediately. I don't even have a link for you at the moment. That will be coming in the coming days. It will likely become in certain ways like a major part of this stream, because we do plan for this to be a big part of the movement. At the end of the day, everybody needs food and everybody needs understanding. And what I mean by understanding is that they need to take the things that don't make sense to them and place them in a position where those things stand underneath them, so that they can stand above them and look on them and see the totality of what they are and truly know what those things are. So understand, that the word understand, in many ways that we use it, is like a very cryptic form of neuro-linguistic programming that makes the information more powerful than you. That's not the goal. We aim to give you an overarching viewpoint of information as we have seen it, and we encourage you guys sharing your views so that we can hear how you have seen information as well. The answer to this big puzzle that is life requires all of the pieces that are in it. Your input is always very valid. We encourage you to at any time call into the show. You can call in by voice or video. If you don't feel comfortable having a picture of yourself, that is totally fine. Like, you do not have to have that. Call in by voice instead. If you want to just contact us through chat, that's totally fine as well. You can contact us through the social media platforms that we have. I have them open the whole time that we're sitting here doing this. So, let's see. We're supposed to talk about plant medicines tonight. I could start talking about plant medicines in a certain way. Plant medicines are the whole reason that this whole thing happened in a long form. So my experience with plant medicines goes a very, very long time back. I started using basically psychedelic drugs. Really, the intention was recreationally when I was very young. Very shortly, though, after that, I had had psychedelic drugs presented to me in a way where they were very much so more or different than other drugs. As a byproduct of that, I was really eager to learn about them. I did look at them as something more than just recreation, even though I did treat them more recreationally, certainly, than I do at this point in time. Although my use of them now, I would call hyperceremonial. So it's like just the inverse of super recreational, really. Nevertheless, over the process of using these things, I've progressively been able to get past blockages in myself on many different levels, and it looks like Aaron is having irreconcilable technical difficulties tonight. He maxed out all of his data, so he will have to figure that out. He's been actually joining the stream the whole time from the phone. At first, he wanted to actually run the stream from his phone, but he would have ran out in like a couple episodes, and then we'd have serious problems. So we do not have those problems because I'm running it from a wired connection. But I do want to figure out where my friend Will is. He's surely around somewhere. We'll figure it out here. So, anyways, I would be really eager to hear any experiences that you guys have had with plant medicines. I will continue to share mine after this. Uh, Really, I've spent a long time working with these medicines, working with dream analysis, psychedelic state analysis, really just analysis of conscious spaces. As a byproduct of that, I've gotten pretty damn good at figuring out what it is inside of there that we can really use to learn about ourselves, given that I am provided enough information. If you do have situations in your life that you have trouble understanding, especially like highly intuitive situations relating to dreams, I'm more than happy to try and answer inside of here. If these questions are bigger, it's something that's been going on for a really long time. It's something that you feel you want to enhance your dream states, learning how to lucid dream more effectively, learning how to analyze your own dreams more effectively, all these kinds of things like that. These are all things that I can very much so help you learn. We would work, if you want to learn long-term things, we can work one-on-one and learn those things. But if you have any, dreams that you are fine with sharing publicly and you're interested with having analyzed, we can definitely look into them here as well. Really, all of this ties in the sense that really we have an ordinary state of consciousness. That's what we call sober and awake. Right? Like your standard place, you're conscious right now. When we say we're conscious, really all we mean is that we're at basically a normalized state of consciousness that is basically the default. There are many different places that you can get outside of that. Generally, we measure these through brainwave lengths. Um, as far as as far as that goes, just in your own normal life, through sleeping, you're gonna and being very relaxed, you're gonna get into lower ones. By being hyper focused or hyper conscious, oftentimes meditative states focused on visualization or deep levels of focus, get into higher states of that as well. And oftentimes drugs seem to put us there as well. Really, all kinds of things can do this. When we deviate from what is our normal bandwidth, we have what is in many ways you could just refer to as non-ordinary states of consciousness. Oftentimes, many of the experiences that people have that are visions, dreams, very lucid experiences, even psychedelic experiences, stuff they see in meditations, whatever the case is, like this, like I've seen it pop up in every way. It's all over the place, but basically the same thing. If your brain pops out of that bandwidth of ordinary consciousness, there's a good possibility that you will have a non-ordinary conscious experience. When we have a non-ordinary conscious experience, what we generally have is some way of some understanding of ourself expressing itself, that we do have that inside of ourselves, but we do not understand it logically most of the time. It will present itself through logical symbols that through some manner of connection we associate to things abstractly that can point us towards the understanding if we put all of these symbol sets together. So basically what we're getting with is if we understand all of the parts of the story and we put them into the right place and we understand what those parts of the story are saying, we can understand what the moral of the story is, and then we can get some kind of functional learning thing out of that that will allow us to actually enhance our life here in the physical, normal, ordinary consciousness reality. And the ordinary consciousness reality is really just a coagulation of all of the states of reality being experienced in one place that we believe is very static and very balanced. That's why things stay shaped. Time goes at a very linear pace. There's lots of cycles, etc. All of these things. Your brain waves operate in cycles. That's why you think cycles everywhere at a very fundamental level. So, nevertheless, uh, you experience the best downloads on herbs. Many of these, they really can. They can be very, very beneficial for tapping into different energy sources, especially if you have a very clean diet with them and you utilize these medicines as basically part of a shamanic dieta. You can have basically in your system only like water, that plant that you're trying to engage with, and in some cases, if you prefer to go this way, some type of other plant that enhances the ability to interface with that plant. In Amazonian shamanism, this is very commonly ayahuasca, as they understand it, as basically the master teacher. And when they do plant dietas, even if you do it with a totally normal herb that is not a psychedelic herb or is not intended to have really any kind of psychoactive effect, although some of them do have noticeable psychoactive effects if you diet them in large amounts, we use something like ayahuasca to enhance it. Ayahuasca interfaces with the other plant and basically makes its lesson louder, is pretty much the idea, or allows us to hear a quieter message. Either way, basically makes the message louder. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. So, nevertheless, working with these plant medicines can allow us to see deeper into basically our subconscious, or what is an understanding that we do not understand about ourselves. Really, everything is functionally an expression of self. Maybe that's not the only thing it is. We could split hairs about that all day based off of your experiences. But at the end of the day, anything you do experience can be taken as a representation of self, and as a byproduct of that, something can be learned from it. So actually, just today, it felt like I unlocked the information from the Arcturian meditation the other day. That's really cool to hear. It's very common that oftentimes it will take several days for it to set, or until you get basically into the right phase coherence with the information that is being sent here. And we could get into basically trying to understand some abstract equations, or like going into deep math as to how this happens and looking at the various different functions of it. But the idea basically is that as we move through sometimes space, sometimes time really is moving through space. You're on a rock that flies through space, so you're always moving through space. As we get to the right position, and our basically what is our format, our wavelengths, what we are right now, conjugates properly with what the space is right then we trigger the knowing of these things. So oftentimes when we get these downloads, we're basically tuned to another wavelength, but it takes some time to get to the point of unlocking that. And sometimes that can be a progressive experience where you see, progressively deeper and deeper levels of the information. Oftentimes when we get these kinds of symbolic metaphors or channeled messages or anything like that, everything should be looked at multidimensionally, or said another way, you could come back to it multiple different times. So look at it right away, but then look at it again in like 3 months. This is why it's a good reason to keep a journal of your dreams and things like this, because oftentimes when you have a little bit of hindsight on your life now from the point that you did have the dream or experience or download, whatever you want to call it, it's much easier to put in line what that's saying. But what it's saying might be more than you have so far put into line, if that makes any sense. So let's see. Aaron says, beautiful, Nina. Want to come on the show and tell us about it? I would love to have you on the show. If you want to come on and talk about it right now, that would be cool. If you want to talk about it in chat, that would be cool. I'd love to hear what you feel like you are unlocking from this. Sometimes by talking to other people about what we're unlocking, especially people who tapped into the same energies, their input or perspective on it will just be kind of like a snap of the thing that we need, as they basically tune our DNA to lock into that information and let out that knowing inside of ourselves, so that we can truly see it emerging from inside of ourselves and reproducing outside of ourselves. And that is really how we get it into a cohesive place where it is a knowing rather than positioned in one isolated location. So April says she has found tapping into non-psychedelic plants are powerful too. Definitely, like, huge on this. If you want to learn about love, Rose is very good at this, and it doesn't really have a psychoactive effect at all. She says, picking my own herbs for chamomile with an intention to heal, allowing the plants to choose me, and watch how we integrate together. This is just beautiful. Like, this is really like the truly shamanic way to do it. And it's very interesting, because if you truly like do it this way, you don't actually learn a lot about the plants beforehand. You go out there, you interface with the plants, and you let them teach you about them. So you actually learn from them. And that is really just such an amazing experience. They really do have so much to teach. If there's anything that I learned from the Amazon, like, wow, do plants talk a lot. It is so crazy. Like, if you spend some time like really indulging with ayahuasca and spending time integrating with the jungle, and you're doing many meditations a day, and you're doing yoga in the jungle and all, like, you're totally immersed in the idea. I mean, at least in my personal experience, very much so, the plants started to do something that felt like singing to me, in the sense that if I really connected with the plant, I would be able to hear like a melody inside of my head. I would oftentimes want to recreate it with my own voice. But if I listened and tuned into this and really continued to just pay attention to the plant, not really specifically think of anything, I would have multiple like eureka moments, basically, where stuff was just occurring to me. And I think that that's a really cool way to just learn from plants. I mean, in that case, I was only visually ingesting them, and maybe you could say that I was sonically ingesting them. We're kind of always sonically ingesting something, and for visually ingesting it, because whatever sound it makes definitely gets farther than its light. So over days of working together, yeah, like it's best if you're going to work with these things that you work with them over a period of time, and like especially if you can get like the rest of your diet as clean as possible to allow them to basically have the space to speak. Is they give them the stage, right? Like water is the stage, it carries all life and experience through our body, but then as we eat stuff on top of that, those nutrients or whatever the scale you want to look at them, it's fine with me, we got a metaphor for it, but those, you could say, the plants, right? These plants get carried through your body or through your experience, and if they have a very clear vessel to do that where it's just the water, then really they're the only thing talking inside of your experience, and you can get a very, very deep connection with them. Obviously, this is like not nutritionally sound in most cases, and if you're going to do it like this, you want to do it for short periods of time, like generally like 3 days. You probably are at a point where like you need to actually eat something. That would generally be the standard. Again, always with everything, do your research, ask lots of questions, use your discernment, trust your heart with everything, know which plans to do. And that's what I think is really beautiful about this, April. It's like you're allowing, you're placing that intention to them. You're basically putting out there like, this is what I want to do, and then allowing them to come forward to you, and really just trusting that interaction. That is really just so amazing. And Nina saying that lavender chamomile tea gives her the craziest, most vivid dreams. Yeah, a lot of people with the chamomile tea have experienced heightened dream states. There's quite a few other different things that also work in this fashion. A lot of, well, there's there's all kinds of weird plants from Australia that work for dreams, because the Aboriginal people, I'm not sure if that's actually a racist term. If it is, I'm sorry. You guys got to know what I'm talking about. The original people who lived in Australia, that lived off of the land, they very much so, their whole metaphor for like higher consciousness is the dream time. They even believe that this is the dream time where we are right here. And so a lot of their things are around basically the idea of dreaming. There's literally plants that are referred to as like dream root and things like this. Um, Playing with California poppies. I would be really interested to hear anything that you feel that you specifically learned from the poppy. I haven't really interfaced with that much at all. I mean, I get opium comes from a poppy, and I've definitely done a little bit of opium. I wonder whether opium has similar messages to actually ingesting through a more, I'm sure what is a more shamanic, not doing opium way that you're doing it is. I wonder if they have the same message, what differences there are to the message. I always think that's really interesting in the sense that, like, well, ayahuasca, for instance, there's a lot of different places that you can, there's a lot of different ways to make an analog of ayahuasca. Functionally, if you're making ayahuasca, all you're doing is you're making a tea that has DMT, liquid, and some type of monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And these are fairly plentiful. Ayahuasca, the vine itself, it has a lot of these, right? So, and that's really what the vine brings. When you make it in the traditional style, you also mix it with a plant that is known as, Latin term is Psychotria viridis, is known as chacruna to the people, the Shipibo people, who actually found basically developed, but they wouldn't say developed. They said they learned it from the plants, the recipe for ayahuasca. So the typical traditional brew is chacruna and the ayahuasca vine, and that's because the chacruna carries the DMT and the ayahuasca vine carries basically the monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So if you want to make a more visionary brew, simply what you do is that you make sure that when you're mixing the tea and you're steeping it down, you just put in more chacruna than you normally would. In the jungle, this is not a science by any stretch of the imagination. They basically just make layers in the pot, and if you want it to be more vision inducing, then you basically make bigger layers of leaves than you otherwise would, and use your intuition. Jungle is very much so about use your intuition. So hello Arya. Aaron also says hi. Quick tangent out to this. The work of Dr. Emoto should be read by everybody, just because realistically this guy probably got killed for looking into the fact that water actually had memory and presenting scientific studies of it. The work that he did has been carried on by a whole lot of other people. I don't remember her name on Instagram right now. There's a girl that I work with that she actually works directly with these institutes in China that have basically, I think it's China, that have carried on, it might be Japan, I don't really remember. Nevertheless, it's her thing. She has worked with them, and the places that they have gone with that work are actually like my mind was blown when I was actually like shown. I was like, oh, whoa, they really took this far. That work is really still going on, and there's so much to that. And the fact that we have so much water inside of ourselves and the implications of that, I think, really gives us a great scientific basis to carry over the study or the idea that inside of spirituality, functionally, that our intention and our prayer, or whatever you want to call it, does have the ability to change what is going on inside of our own internal body. There's water all over in the air. There's water inside of all life. Water is basically the basis for life. And Dr. Emoto's work really shows that we really do have the ability to influence that conclusively. So his work is very important, and everybody should basically, share that, really, and they should know about it themselves. If you are curious about whether that is even a possibility, just look into his work for a little bit. Like, it's tremendous. It's just amazing. So Heather says, I'm curious if simple focus on and contact with certain herbs would assimilate the vibration of the intention of the plant in lieu of ingestion. I would say yes, but I come from the place where really, like, we start any type of interaction basically like super metaphysically. Like, if this is where we actually start physically interacting with the herb, right? How do you just right here, right? So it's like here. Then all the way up here would be where we really actually start the interaction, right? Like, there's this, it's from our higher self, you can call it, but it echoes through basically the dimensions. At a certain point, we catch wind of it and we start getting interested in that. We think it's basically like free will, but functionally it's a message from source being carried out by us, and that connection has probably already been made on the higher dimensionalities, in my opinion. A lot of my work with ayahuasca gave, and a lot of other people that I know, a very common message with ayahuasca, we could say, is that, like, I have always been here, I've always been helping you. And a way that gets abstracted by a lot of people is that there was kind of always a draw that they were going to end up engaging with the plant, and the plant was going to help them, and that the plant was always drawing them to it. And when they finally actually met it, that was just kind of like this collapse point where what they were before had been drawn to this in order to basically be turned into something else so that it could go grow somewhere else. And so inside of ayahuasca culture, it's very much so believed that your interaction with the plant starts well before you would ever be ingesting the plant, or even really honestly thinking about ingesting the plant. The connection's already been made. It's really just once you start becoming conscious of it, it's kind of whether or not you get in the way of it. So Arya says herbs are fun, definitely. And we already said these highs. Love all of you. Thank you all for being here. Everybody says hi to Arya, and April says hi as well. I love all of you so much. Like, realistically, if we've interacted in any capacity, you gotta know that you've been super meaningful to my life, and you have very much so helped me in some way. If I have helped you, know that you have also helped me, and I really do appreciate how much you guys have helped me in my life. And I actually don't know Gerald Pollack. I don't know much about this person's work. I should educate myself on that. I'm actually going to take down the name right now, and if I run out of things to talk about, I'll actually just start looking at it on stream. Let's see, what was this guy? So was this guy the structured water guy? Can you tell me in the chat whether that was the structured water guy? Fourth phase of water beyond solid. Yeah, see, this is why Aaron's supposed to be here, because he knows what you're talking about, and then it can sound like we know what we're talking about on the show. I only halfway know what we're talking about at best. So, oh, the waves before and after ingestion. Yeah, totally. I mean, the way that it was kind of represented to me was the interaction. So I was shown a vision at one point in time of basically like a big still pool of, you could call it water. It wasn't really water. It was kind of like a mercurial superfluid. But then basically like a drop hit that. And I knew that drop to be basically just a thought of like existence. And that basically carried out in waves that went to the boundary of what this thing was. But when it got to the boundary, then it came back across it. And as it came back across it, I kind of got this understanding to myself that really only as a byproduct of that coming back across it was where I was really believing as one wave was like this and the other one came back across it like this. Is it making it? Is that an X? When it made an X, right? When one wave was coming across like this and the other one was coming across like this, and they got to this point in this little precise moment right here where everything came into perfect phase conjugation, that's where a moment snaps into being. And this happens very, very, very fast. But since we were viewing it as a byproduct of the reverberation, this is very much so why we experience a byproduct of mirroring and projecting, and there's all kinds of stuff like this going on. As we start to detangle that, we start to get to a place where we feel we've gotten like all the way out there. We see it from the farthest point that we could see it, but very much so from that point in my own experience, I kind of also found that now I needed to like reel it back in and understand it back the other way. And it's really about knowing it both ways. Or, you know, as I was basically told by an ayahuasquero, ninth generation ayahuasquero, Shipibo, lives in a village north of Pucallpa called San Francisco along the Amazon River. Great guy. His name is Dio Demero Minas. He is fantastic individual, very powerful singer, very powerful vegetalismo, ayahuasquero, sanangero. He does the whole shebang. He's known by many as the best singer in the southern Amazon. He's honestly just fucking incredible. As he said to me, basically, there's two snakes inside of all of us, and it's our job to choose which one we feed. But we need to also be mindful that there are two snakes inside of all of us all the time. And this is, he was not talking to me on one dimension. He was actually talking to me on like literally two dimensions, and then like many dimensions at the same time, because this has continued to emerge over my life. But inside of this situation, what I very much so realized is that I needed to not only understand my projection and my interpretation, but also the feedback that basically that caused from the interaction of those two things coming into coherence. I think many people get to this point. They go to the point where they say basically it's all about love, or their whole focus comes on like some kind of devotion to love. That's my format of love. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like two waves coming into basically an X. A moment of existence happens, and the question of whether it is love or not is whether or not we see that moment and appreciate it. That's pretty much what it is. So we're trying to be present all the time of both of the waves coming together so that we can find that precise moment where it's really happening. But the beauty of all of it is that we're doing all of the hard work everywhere else. We're the moment where that thing fucking collapses. So you just get to live your entire life in the most precise, amazing, magical moment in the entire universe. And that's basically what your entire life is doing. And that's pretty much what was, well, it was said to me in a certain way, telepathically, while I was perceiving this vision of this water or something, a drop of consciousness that was literally just intent on experience. It wanted to know what experience was, hitting this mercurial pool and reverberating out and coming back onto itself. And basically, as it collapsed to the middle, I was like, oh, I see. That is at least my experience. I mean, I would love to hear what everybody else thinks. If this is totally ridiculous, I would like to know, because it's very, very real in my life. And I think you will find that it has very, very strong implications in your own life if you follow this storyline as well. Having said that, never follow any storyline that does not resonate with you. If this is not something that like you go, oh my gosh, waves, crossing, conjugation, oh my gosh, this is perfect for me, oh my. If it doesn't get that passion going for you, it's the wrong fucking story. Don't listen to it. So let's see what's going on here. No, I'm probably not. This is basically standard Zach function when he gets on top of a soapbox and nobody else is making him shut up. I love all of you too. Like Angela said yesterday, this is a very special thing. Yes, Angela did say that yesterday. We're going to have her back to lead more meditations so that we can bring the tribe together and cohere our hearts in metaphysical space, provide the things that we need for ourselves within our own community, and then stand sovereign, not waiting for someone else to save us, but rather saving ourselves and creating the earth that we want. And we will do it all together. And I'm so excited to have all of you here. One of a kind. I am, and we are all one thing. Isn't that amazing? It's so crazy how both those things can be true at the same time. Heather, I had a thought related to your thought with plants and intention. I have been practicing calling on my intention now for what I want my past self to have learned or impact. So example, I willed that I would meet my soul family and find the teachers and books now, but for my past self 2 years ago, What I'm finding that I am willing my past in my current moment, and oddly my current world is shaping in front of me now based off decisions I made in the past. I think the same can be true for plants. Wow. Now, what a beautiful thing that you're experiencing. This is just so damn cool. I definitely like I'm okay. It's interesting that you tap into this right now. You talk about soul bond, like this is an expression of that for me. In the jungle, I very much so had an experience where I recognized that like my future was already dragging me into it, and that thing was already working for me in order to make me into the person that I needed to be. And then at another time, I looked back on that when I basically bounced the other direction and realized that that put me in the moment having these implications to do things for basically versions of myself from the past. And it's really weird because it was creating the teachers in my present moment, but it also created like inverted students in the other moment as well. And I think very much so we are doing that. We're seeing the reverberation of these two waves. So you've got those like two interactions, right? Like as it comes out, right? And then as it then goes away, it does basically the same thing. And you do have these things flowing both forwards, functionally, forwards and backwards simultaneously. So both interactions are happening, and very much so we can speak to our experience that way. The whole study of eschatology that is, no longer really studied by people, but used to be basically like a high science. It was studied in like Oxford University and shit. Believed in the idea of that, like that the future was already determined, and going deeper into it, basically that the future could be determined, or that we could, on a deeper level, create objects in the future that would then basically attract us to them, much the way that the past seems to propel us forward into the future. So just basically thinking of that as, instead of the past pushing us, the future pulling us along to basically heighten the rate at which something happened, or be able to turn the direction, the vector of the present moment as it proceeds into the future by creating a different future for it. This is all the study of eschatology. And so really, in a certain way, we can say there's actually like a lot of scientific study behind the thing that you're experiencing with that. The question I have is, how do herbs interact with each level of consciousness? I mean, whew, now there's a broad question right there. Generally, I find, okay, well, with psychedelic substances, they basically shut off the lower dimensions of the self in terms of what you're experiencing when you get into really deep states, and escalate the higher dimensionalities of the self. That does not mean that you will not have an expression that is representative of something that happens in those lower dimensions, but meaning more that you will be like, uh, there will be a sensory deprivation from those experiences. So you definitely see some that seem to like tune you up so high that you aren't really low anymore. And you definitely see inside of life where we talk about foods that are like toxic, not good for you, they're calcifying your pineal gland, all kinds of things like this. We can look at those and say that those things bring you so low that they cut you off from your high. So it's really basically just the inverse to that. Now, there are some plants that, since they don't have a psychoactive effect, what we're saying with that is that when we interpolate basically their waveform into us, their energetic signature, that energetic signature moving with ours is not going to take our energetic signature and force it into a place that is what we perceive as a non-ordinary state of consciousness. If we were moving to a non-ordinary state of consciousness as a byproduct of that ingestion, we would call them psychoactive plants. So if they're a non-psychoactive plant, they kind of live in that mid layer where basically the interaction with them functionally stays within the realms of what you could understand non-ordinary consciousness. I personally have my own like map to what are the dimensional levels of consciousness. I personally recommend that everybody makes their own theory of everything. That's the most functional one for you. In my own map, this kind of looks like that basically we're still tapped in with like the bottom, you could call it 6 dimensions, but it starts getting foggy in the 5th, and the connection with the 6th is kind of low by default. We can expand this definitely, but very much so in my experience, like, well, like dieting Rose, for instance, it came through in the formats of basically like automatic writing, other people that I met, basically just like thought experiences that I had, like thoughts that would occur to me or a different way that data looked. Something that I would say that I just like recognized the words I was using in a different way. And so a lot of things that basically had to do with like my mind or my body predominantly going through some type of experience that was really becoming like a projection of that. So in that, for me, Rose primarily worked in these areas. I know a lot of people that have dieted Rose where they've also used ayahuasca with it, and when they've done that, very much so the ayahuasca, you know, whoosh, because that's basically what ayahuasca does all the time. Ayahuasca, I explained it once, where ayahuasca is basically like you live in like all these different sea of probabilities, and ayahuasca is like a crane machine game, and it just like comes over and like boop, it picks you up and just and just like puts you in a completely different life. And it's like you're just up, you're over here now. And so it very much so like pulls you out of the experience. So really, I mean, I like that about it. It's a very interesting thing to experience, but it's sometimes not that easy to experience. Superfluidic soapbox, that presents a very interesting image, being as soap creates all kinds of bubbles when it's mixed with fluid, and bubbles are kind of an example of the fact that we're living in a superfluid. So technically a soapbox submerged in water would be presenting a superfluid version of itself, but you're basically saying that I'm floating around on a bubble box, which is pretty cool because bubbles are spheres, not boxes, but I like the idea. April, I love that you are the creator of your universe. April is the creator of many universes, far and wide. She just happens to be gracing us with her presence in this one. I believe all of you are actually that. Charlotte says absolutely about something, but absolutely about all of these things, very much so. April says yes, Heather, and yeah, but April also, she's just really being here in this reality, this presence. Heather says, or Arya is saying to Heather, I think there's been much empirical research done on the physical impact of herbs, also lots of recording on the metaphysical properties of them historically over time. And she usually uses those associations as a springboard and then disperses the applications of it over the way the levels of consciousness would disperse into the ethers, if that makes sense. What did you say here, Heather? Studied Chinese medicine and nutrition as well as a metaphysical practitioner. Yeah, Heather has a good information basis for this. So Heather is a very strong one. Heightened sensitivity to food and herbs. You probably have heightened sensitivity to everything on an intuitive level. You probably know what I'm thinking right now. Erin says that is awesome. Aria echoes that you've noticed correlations between them. I'm sure she's noticed lots of them. I feel herbs, oils with my hands and can sense their medicinal properties through my hands. See, now, like, that's fucking cool, dude. Like, I wish I could do that. I definitely can't do that. Like, I'm more like logical data bank, which sucks in that regard. I very much so feel like if I wanted to sculpt a certain side of myself that was doing other things and not leaning into what I am already really good at, I feel like I would. I mean, there's a whole different version of me that ran away to the Amazon and never talked to anybody ever again, and basically walks around and feels herbs and oils with his hands all day long to sense their medicinal properties. So, like, that's in a certain way, that's like, I honestly could go just live that life and be completely fine and just do nothing else. I've had many visions of it. I had a wonderful vision that was of me completely naked in a small clearing in the jungle, and like there was a storm coming, and I could tell that like the jungle was all raucous and everything, and I just like knew beyond a shadow of a doubt in that moment that everything was perfectly fine, even though I had absolutely nothing because I was in the center of the jungle, so I was completely safe. So now I just basically keep that vision in my mind and pretend I'm always in the jungle, which means I'm always safe. So I'm just going to put this on the screen to pretend like Aaron is saying, wow, Zach, that's awesome. You know, because he said awesome right here. So thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was a very powerful experience for me. And I'm going to pretend that this comment also came in during that. So I love that. Let's see. Try and catch up here. There's too much chat. It's not too much chat. I appreciate that you guys are chatting so much. I'm not gonna put them on the screen. I'm curious. Well, actually, I can just read them on there. I'm curious if I could expand my knowledge in another way. Expand consciousness. Clarify. Absolutely, I use physical sensation and say, "Show me." I don't know if I would have benefit. Aria, what's your thoughts for advantages? This is back over here. Must be. I don't know. I can't keep track of it. Aria nevertheless said, connecting with the herbs on several levels would have so many benefits, wouldn't it? Like the more we get in touch with our tools, the more adept we get, right? Yeah, I think like if you're really doing like a really intuitive sense of interfacing with the plants and you wanted to basically add another way, you just add more logical ways. And it sounds like you've definitely added a basis for that. If you feel like that basis is conclusive, then you're probably psyched on that side and you're probably super good. So, you're too much chat, Zach. That has been actually true for basically my entire life. I definitely talk too much. I'm literally gonna mute myself while I take this drink just because I should be muted in real life. All right, so yeah. Anyways, I actually caught up with chat, sort of. Aaron says bubble box Zach. He digs it, but it would be very, very, very difficult to dig on a bubble box because it's made of bubbles. So does he really dig it, or is that just a thing he's saying? I think it's just a thing he's saying. You call it a colloquialism or whatever. I don't know. I'm not from here. I just speak this language. So, anyways, let's see. No one ever told me. Is Gerald Pollock? Gerald Pollock. I actually can talk. I don't like my tongue's not broken or something. Gerald Pollock. Is he the guy that did structured water? Is that what the fourth phase of water is all about? Is that the thing? I mean, I guess I could just like, what's this water say? It's a TED Talk. The fourth phase of water. What is this all about? Fourth phase explains a lot. Yeah, I don't know. I should probably watch this video and learn more about that. I don't know enough about that at all, that's for sure. I love your energy too. This is all of our energy. Please, everyone, anytime that you ever feel like you do not have enough energy, just literally inside of your head, be like, Zach, give me some energy and believe that it will happen. I have literally infinite amounts of energy knowingly and consciously flowing through me. You can have as much as you want. I'm putting all of it out all day long. I don't keep any of it. Just go right on through. Yeah, I can just like keep Aaron's comments in here and then just jump to them to act like he's supporting me the whole time. That would be perfect. So yes, polarized water bridges and clouds are his applications. Yeah. So I mean, I think that just based off of that, like the implications are potentially really huge when I kind of cross it over more to my wheelhouses where we're talking about like computing technology, connectivity. If we were able to really create very stable, basically what you could call condensates that held different forms, it's potential that we could use water as a really good conductor for all kinds of things, and maybe the applications of that would be really, really cool. I don't know. I really haven't spent a ton of time thinking about those potential applications. As far as the structured water thing, man, my mom must have brought that up like so how long ago? It was so long ago that my mom started like having me talk to our water all the time. And it was right after the Emoto stuff, like while he was still alive doing his thing, for sure, is when she got all super hyped on this. And then that's when I was forever on the water thing. When was that? I don't really remember. A long time ago. The Hidden Messages in Water was published in 2004. So it was probably right about around that time. And so, like, I've been doing a lot with that, and even doing kind of weird stuff where it's kind of like the idea of basically just yeah, he theorizes power as well, for sure. Yeah, like if you have water, like there's a lot that you can do there. Water is honestly like in a certain way like a fucking miracle. So if you have better control over it, and we can sculpt it and things like that, like it's just it's just so amazing. So yeah, like getting into other applications are very much so. Oh, cool. That's super cool that your mom's getting into that stuff as well. A lot of times I meet people that are like, oh, it's so cool you got a mom that was into this stuff. It's cool to meet somebody else that was like, my mom showed me that too. So I started doing like even I mean like I found like the occult very interesting throughout my life, and as a byproduct of that, of course, like witchcraft and other type of esoteric systems like that. I'm very much so in line with that, like the idea of talismanic magic or sigil magic, and utilizing sigils, words, basically like drawings and words. Words are drawings. These things to also bring some layer of structuring to that, or even generating these kinds of sigils, and you could even call them just basically altars in the space around the water to kind of be trying to gather something from, well, depending on what kind of sigil you're using, maybe you're trying to gather many dimensions into the space of the water, then basically to the bottle, and then another sigil to basically bring it directly into the water with a very purposeful intention. And so like the idea of basically collapsing many dimensions through multi-dimensional talismanic magic around the outside of the water, because really that's all that is about, like putting a bunch of intention and energy into a space. So I'm really into the Monroe Institute. I talk about it all the time. Tom Campbell is one of the most vocal people about the Monroe Institute in more modern times, and he very much so is about that, like the tools that any tools can work. What's really the thing at the end of the day is that you need to make sure that you're really putting all of your focus towards it if you really want to have the best result, and know that like the level of focus you have probably obtained at the highest point of focus that you have in your life right now is not even the highest possible to obtain. So really like push yourself to be even more focused and see what the boundaries and the limits of your consciousness are. That's really the only way that you're ever going to find them. And know that, like, well, Nina and Arya, I presume this is the Nina that is Arya's friend Nina. You could let me know in the chat if I'm wrong. Nevertheless, last time I talked to Arya, there was also someone named Nina on the phone, and we talked about how basically like the idea of working out the consciousness, or even just like the logical or intuitive side of the mind, can very much so be looked at as like the process of functionally like weightlifting, how you can basically pump iron by doing consistent repetitions with something. I mean, the applications of this fundamental or functional concept is can be pretty vast, because it's really just like with anything, right? Like anything that you're trying to do, you can approach it with this idea that as I put in work trying to do the thing, progressively the body that is doing the thing is getting stronger. And depending on the dimensionality that you're approaching yourself, there's some application where you could work on what you could call a body, which is basically just a dimensionality of yourself, and you could grow that body through functionally a process that is much like weightlifting. You just got to figure out what the weights are to lift, and then put in the discipline to continue to lift them, which, like, now there's the hard part. So discipline. Do you have it? The answer is no at whatever level is your limit, right? Like the reason why you can't just instantaneously create whatever reality you want is because you lack discipline at a certain level. So cyclomancy, not familiar with that name, gotta look it up real fast. Let's see what this one's about. So this mancy, so the control of cyclo, I'm guessing this would either cyclones, spinning, something to do with spinning probably. Form of divination based on spinning an object and deriving predictions. Okay, sure, yeah, like spin the bottle, that makes sense. Sure, yeah, that's definitely one way to do it. Divination is like one of these things that really, like, you can use that to build the symbol sets. Dream analysis, another way to get into this. Really like just watching watching Disney films and pulling the things that are inside of there can be a really good way to do this, but recognize that all of those are very much so pretty managed programming, for lack of a better word. Like conditioning. Yeah, I mean, really, that's the thing, right? Like, we say that basically all of our problems are basically as a byproduct of either our transgenerational, social, or personal conditioning functionally, with the way that we've trained ourselves to be through our experiences. Otherwise, there's no way that we could blame our past for how we're acting in our present. So functionally from that, you take a forward looking view on the idea of conditioning. if my life is completely built out of conditioning, then the amount of conditioning that I'm doing right now will inevitably determine my later condition on basically any level. So you just have to apply it properly to that level, and where the attention goes, the energy flows, and where the energy is flowing, you get the gains, as people like to call it in these days with the old weightlifting. So unfortunately, well, that's not entirely true. Plants, as we talked about before, very much so can be seen as like supplements or steroids. Like somebody wants to gain more muscles, they eat more proteins. If you want to expand your knowing in certain ways, or your mind or consciousness, and whatever you want to call it, you can also use basically plants as supplements for this. You can also use chemical supplements as well. There are all different ways to basically get more focus into a different scale of dimensionalities of yourself. And the more that you do that, the more you can do things in those spaces, and you can train certain parts of yourself. The repetition of it, yeah, like it's always, I mean, just do it a bunch of times and then you'll be good at it. The better that we are at engaging basically failure, and knowing that it's just like when we're successful will be because we failed like a million billion times. So repetition of any conditioning. You're talking with cyclomancy, the repetition of the cyclomancy? I'm not sure what you mean. I'm off track now. Specifically, they talk about singular muscle exercise ascending through consciousness. Yeah, I mean, in a certain way, you see a very close crossover with this, basically inside of a lot of different yoga disciplines. Cyclomancy, the secret of psychic powers, controlled by Frank Rudolph Jung. Growth of either the physical or mental requires a form of resistance to push against in order to become stronger than the force applied. Yeah, that's basically the thing. It's the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. Basically, that philosophical concept going on, and you are the unstoppable force. And if the unstoppable force has enough discipline or enough want, enough drive, inevitably it's going to find some way to either disintegrate or get around the immovable object. So it's going to be able to keep moving. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a lot with like the cyclomancy, really. Like mostly I use tarot cards. I use a lot of just like completely random shit a lot of times, where I just basically like pick up some stuff and then throw it, and it just creates basically like an intuitive symbol to me, or will land in some way that is a very much so logical symbol. Uh, I don't know. I mean, cyclomancy is probably all of these ways of approaching it. It's really just like the ones that appeal to you. Like in a certain way, that one does appeal to me because I like vortexes, cyclones, spinning, all this kinds of stuff. So it really like aligns with me in that way. But at the day, also, I really like to just like push my intuition to be able to do it without any kind of tool. As I was kind of saying before, like technically it's really just about all getting the focus to be able to like project your energy deep enough. And if we can do that without any outside tools, I think that's really like the most liberated that we can be. And I think that is very, very possible. We just have to, have to do the things to be able to do that. It has to be something we actually want to do. Let's see here. I don't know what happened to Will. I'm very usually. Oh, okay. He says he's getting back home now and almost ready. I don't know when he said that. He's not inside of StreamYard, so I don't know. I'll tell him to come. Come. So let's see. No, Aaron. He upgraded his plan, but it did not upgrade until midnight. So, yeah, favorite way to do it naturally with self, which I think that's the whole goal at the end of the day, right? Like we're able to do all the things that we ever heard of just really like by ourselves. That's a lot of the reason why with psychedelics I've turned to like a much more like hyper ceremonial usage of them. At one point in time I kind of got a message through psychedelics that really basically they were teaching me at that point in time how to become them, and how to basically create that kind of symbolic experience or understanding experience for somebody else. Not because I couldn't get any more benefit out of them. I can get more benefit out of them. There's no doubt about that. I have plenty of things to work on myself. April's coming over on Sunday to do a shamanic healing on me, because I know full well I have things to work on myself. So I'm always open to this, and I'm, very excited to do that. So nevertheless, like, you can also learn about yourself by helping other people learn about themselves. So I very much so turned to basically a modality of service where I tried to work with other people and help them understand their journey. But through the whole time that I'm doing that, I'm always coming to a better understanding of my journey as well. And it's become just really basically just like a very efficient methodology of learning about myself and helping other people, and allowed me to really actually want to be giving my time to things that are like benefiting other people. I realized, like, I came from a place like I was super self-centered. I didn't give a shit about none of y'all, like nobody. I was trying to get for Zach for sure. And then I moved from that place. So in a certain way, it was like a battle inside of myself to get to a place where like I wanted to give my time away to help other people in any capacity. And really, to be able to actually serve other people, you need to be willing to like give your time away and really like go the extra step to want to meet them and to continue to help them, because you really actually want to see them get help, not because you're just like trying to make a business out of it or something. And it allows me to do things like this podcast. Like, I don't make anything off of this. We've been doing this, like, I've put, I don't know, 100 hours into this in the last week. Not even like, not just the time we've been on here, talking to other guests, making overlays, getting advertising stuff set up, social media, like all this stuff. Like, you have to be willing to like give yourself to your mission. And I think a lot of you already know that about yourself, but maybe for other people that are watching, I know the people that are here in the chat, at least right now, like I mean, I feel like I know all of you pretty good. Nathan, I don't know you as much, but I definitely listened to you talking last night, and it sounds like you've done some really great work, and I'm really interested in the thing that you're doing down there. And I really hope that you do something to like work with the ancestors on the land as well, not just necessarily to quote unquote like appease them or make it okay for you to use the space, but so that you can come to just a deeper understanding of how you are them and you've always been using the space, and continue on in the learning that has always been being done in that space, and really just piggyback on the back of what they were already learning, which was already so beneficial to us. And I mean, hopefully you're still here to hear that, because like I would really like you to hear that. Actually, when you were talking about it last night, I was like, man, I wish I was like up and on the show literally just to say like this one thing. But so let's see. If anybody has anything specific that they want to talk about, I would prefer that. What I'm going to do actually, I'm going to go and take a bathroom break real quick, because I've been talking for an hour straight and not use my voice for a second. So I'm going to bring up some type of music. Is there music on this? What does this sound like? I don't have it. I don't have it shared. I have no idea what this sounds like. So we're going to find out together. It might be too loud. I hope it's not too loud. I hope don't be too loud. Don't do it. Okay, it's not going to be too loud, because it's literally just the great outdoors with like owls and cicadas. That's not going to do it. We're going to look for something else. uh, let's see. This is a pleasing sound. If anybody has a problem with this, then you can turn it off or whatever. But it's not very loud anyways. It's not even good. It's whatever. It's a visual. I'll be back in a few moments. I love all of you. Bye. Okay, I am back. I got a big drink of water, and my throat feels a lot less like I just talked for a couple hours straight. So my friend will be here soon. Maybe, probably. He's a bit nervous, so we'll have to be nice to him. So, wondering how to get activations without herbs and just self. If you really want to go really into that, the way that I would say that, you need to look at like the Monroe Institute documents and basically their methodology. Their methodology is all around generating heightened levels of focus and purposeful hemispherical syncing of the brain, basically. So predominantly what you're doing is sensory deprivation and meditative focus, and then utilizing basically binaural beats to create a purposeful hemispherical sync between the two different hemispheres of your brain. And you do this by utilizing an offset of sine wave frequencies, say, so like every binaural beat. What it means by binaural is that it has an offset. The binaural is not actually so it's interesting that people do this. Like most of the videos that you can find that are like they have a binaural tuning, they're actually like it's just actually like a song tuned to that. It's not true binaurals. Binaurals are actually supposed to be offset between the two hemispheres. That leaves your brain to interpolate that offset, and in that you get brainwave entrainment. So through the process of brainwave entrainment, you can basically tune into specific, and you can actually progressively tune that. Like say, for instance, if you start out at like a 7 hertz offset, you tune into that. So say you have 100 hertz in this year, 107 hertz in this year, and you start at that. You can also you can automate this, or when they did it in the Monroe Institute, they were doing everything analog because it was like late 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. So you just tune over time both of those synchronously so that the offset like gets wider, right? And you can slowly edge someone into purposely being into a higher brainwave state like that, or you can slowly get them down and entrain it to a lower brainwave state. As I was talking about before, with basically we have a band of ordinary consciousness. You could understand it just how the electromagnetic spectrum is gigantic, X-rays and shit and ultraviolet light, and then like in the middle, this tiny little part is what we call the visible spectrum. Your consciousness works that way too. Ordinary consciousness is this tiny little part of what is available inside of consciousness. outside of that ordinary state, which you can purposely push yourself to with brainwave entrainment. And then exploration of those spaces has to do with your ability to maintain focus and not basically disturb the entrainment that's transpiring inside of there. This can also be done other ways by doing binaurals. There's a methodology that the Monroe Institute has. It's called call and response technique that is really about basically like, well, if one person generates a sound in a space, or a sound is generated from the position of a person, and then another sound is generated somewhere else, or if you do those on opposing sides, you get an overlay of sound frequencies, and the body is still left there to basically interpolate the offset. So it's pretty much the same thing, just it doesn't require you to have actually headphones in. If you're doing like brainwave entrainment, you want to have like noise canceling headphones. Ideally, you want to kill all other sound. Have you tried putting the different parts of your body to sleep in order to disconnect from it? This is a really good process of like shutting down the body procedurally. Like if you just start from the toes or from the tips of the fingers and basically just purposely focusing on relaxing each of those. This is really commonly used in hypnotic induction as a way to basically get a person down to lower states where they, just because as you're focusing on that, you do let go of these things. And as when you're doing hypnosis, if you're going to do deep regressions, you want to start interfacing with this motor control very early, because later, after several levels of induction, you're then going to prime the brain with what is called idiomotor responses, which is basically where you ask them questions that the answer is yes to, and then purposely, like say, move a finger when you do that. And as a byproduct of doing that several times, you'll kind of code the subconscious to speak through a twitch or a movement in that finger as a yes. Same thing you can do with no. It's really hard to get outside of like yes and no questions. So when you do this with idiomotor responses, you want to basically then give them a battery of yes and no questions, where really generally when this is used, it'll be like to ask pretty much like if you're in the right space to have some memory or to understand something. And if you're not, then you'll do more inductions, or you'll bring them slightly out of it, or you'll do something to fractionation is one thing that you do to deepen a trance, where you very quickly pull them out of it and then put them back into it. When the mind, this is part of the reason why psychedelics will suddenly like make you sober and then you fall back into it and the trip's even deeper. It's psychological fractionation. When our brain is in like a deep trance-like state, and then it pulls out of that trance-like state right away, but then goes back into it, it seems to always actually go deeper into it. So there's kind of three methodologies of approaching this. Like you can induct them just slowly more, you could gradually pull them out some, or you could snap them out and put them right back in to try and get a big jump back in, and then see whether or not that is the right place. Usually this kind of fractionation induction should be used in like initial deepening, just to get them very deep, because if you're doing like past life regression, quantum healing, hypnosis therapy, anything like this, the things that you're trying to get to are functioning very deep in the subconscious. So you're going to go through a long process of deepening. The standard like deepening process for quantum healing, hypnosis therapy are quite long, like several hours of deepening. So that takes a long time. Disassociation can be achieved through breathing techniques as well. Absolutely. Stanislav Grof, holotropic breathing, definitely gets into this. Many different formats of basically advanced levels of Kriya Yoga are all about functionally creating disassociation through the breath or through purposeful management of CO2 and oxygen levels in the brain. So absolutely, through breathing techniques, you can also assist this. Yeah, that the putting your body to sleep can get you to a neutral start, and then you can pull the energy to the crown and bring in alpha waves, and then we'll basically move through the waves from there. Yeah, well, and in a certain way, from like the Monroe methodology, what you're doing with this is that you're taking away your focus. You're consciously, mindfully, and purposefully taking away the focus from your physical body and focusing it all into the space where you're basically going to manage this, which is what you understand as your brain, but really more like accurately would be basically the top of your superior brachium, and basically the whole kind of space of the corpus callosum, which is where we kind of understand the seat of consciousness. This is really where you're kind of trying to get that all to. I have found that another way to do that, if you're super into the anatomy way, is to basically memorize the anatomy of all the basically the upper brain stem and where it starts to seed into the brain, or really just the entire head cavity. And once you have shut down the whole body like that, kind of put your perspective inside of your skull, which you can easily do by just being like black space, and kind of visualize, or the intention is that like you're inside your skull looking at the outside of it. Now you've shut everything down, and then basically turn around visualizing your brain, and then collapse like through the brain to where you are just seeing the like the corpus callosum, through the corpus callosum to where you're literally like sitting on top watching like the superior brachium operate, and then kind of placing yourself in there. I generally do it as like a little ball of light. This can very much so be done to get into a space of like control of that place. All you're doing is trying to seed your focus right into basically like one point, so that you can easily manipulate that kind of focus. What are your experiences with that personally, or have you helped someone else this way? I've worked with a lot of other people this way. I mean, the experiences that I have are very, very, very long with this. I was introduced to the Monroe techniques when I was, I think, like 11 or 12 years old. I seem to be particularly good at getting into them. It was probably because I got forced into mindlessness meditation, which was really all just like gaining control of the brain, right? Like shutting it down from having thoughts, which is another dimensionality. You're going to need to shut down your mental body as well if you want to get into heightened states of focus. Really, all of this is about purposely shutting down bodies so you can focus all your energy on other bodies. So on other bodies, certain types of rules that you experience in normal reality start to break down. The most commonly interesting ones are the ideas of space and time. So the idea that you could travel to somewhere through your perspective to what you understand to be the future, or what you understand to be the past, or what you understand to be one of your other lifetimes, or a different person's lifetime, or whatever the situation is like that. That's an interesting concept right there. Group QHHT has not shown very good benefits as far as I know. A lot of this is because when you start trying to get really deep into, when you want to get them very, very deeply regressed. There's two reasons for this. In deep regression, you want to start using things that are very specific to them. Like you want to start utilizing their symbol set, as I always say. Like the better that you can use a person's symbol set, the more relevance with the words that you're saying. The less words you can use, the slower that you can talk, the more emphasis you can put on each syllable. You can mold these words to basically work with the person's mind in a certain way and get them into deeper and deeper levels of regression. If they're having to like figure out what fucking words you say mean, or I'm saying, well, for instance, if you have had a very like, you love apples and they're so great, and your father grew apples and he was the best father ever, and apples were the whole reason that your family was actually getting food, or you were working with our project that we're coming up with soon, that will be able to get these apples to the people that need them in the way that they need them, so that we can make sure that we can all eat. And since you were associated with this memory that was so groundbreaking in the world and did change so much, you decided that like to that person, well, apples are very, very important. Now to this other person over here who's literally never had an apple, when I say apple, it doesn't really have very much effect on them. This is not a direct example, but metaphorically you can see how the words I use can have anywhere from a super deep impact to basically no relevance whatsoever. The more that I can hone in on specifically what they talk about, the better they can hear what I'm saying. When you start getting to deeper and deeper levels of hypnotic regression, you're going to need to make sure that they're hearing you very well. QHHT is very deep regression. Because of that, talking to groups, not so good. On top of that, once you do get into the place where you are at the right place, you're very much so having what is experienced generally like a very personal experience, and then you're guiding them very much so through that personal experience, where it's not like I'm not making a generalization of telling you to go to some place like a guided meditation. You're giving me responses of like, are we in the right place? And you don't say anything back, you just like, you have a twitch. Sometimes in QHHT, certain practitioners get people into spaces where they can still talk. That can happen sometimes it's impossible. If they can't, you use ideomotor responses, whatever, but all you're doing is trying to get the story out. You're like some weird kind of journalist that's pulling the story out of the person who has it, but they don't even know they have it. So nevertheless, you're asking them questions, basically guiding them through the place. Like, are we in the right place? They're like, yes, we're in the right place. And it's like, okay, well, basically step forward into the place and tell me, what is the first thing that you see? And then they have some kind of image that flashes to their mind. They say what that thing is. You start developing this story with them as it comes into their vision, and basically then you're guiding them through a very personal meditation through what you could say is just like some type of visual activity or something inside of their mind, but to them will oftentimes very much so feel like a past or future life regression or progression, respectively. So it's kind of a personal thing. It's hard to do it with groups. We can do a whole lot of things to basically work on focus as a group. Everybody can be working on focus all the time, literally like running visualizations in your mind that are like you're trying to be able to see them in your mind's eye, and you're very much so putting all of your effort towards it. You're even trying to like shut down outside impulses. That's the whole point of like closing your eyes, close your mouth, close your ears, close your nose. Try not to have shit like blowing on you or touching you. Shut down your senses, as Arya was saying. Start to shut down your body. These kinds of things. Focus all of your energy towards generating something inside of your mind. If you really want to use your consciousness, this is by far where your consciousness is most powerful. If you start doing this on purpose, you will realize how completely different things happen in your brain, and there is an inevitable overflow through either the way that you act or just synchronistic things that happen in your reality that are a byproduct of the things that you're doing here, and the things that you're doing in that space are really just your intention coming to life. So nevertheless, if you can't focus into that space, once you've gotten to higher levels of focus, you'll realize how in the standard human, ordinary consciousness, I'm walking around living my life, focus is pretty shit. Like, according to the Monroe Institute, it calls focus level 1. There's like 50 focus levels, so you're not close to the top when you're walking around having your day-to-day life. Through progressively shutting down like functions of the body, disassociating from the body, collapsing this whole concept into a very succinct focus, we gain heightened levels of conscious awareness, because we're taking away stuff from out here and putting it towards something more centralized and then focusing it with our intention. So this is a super long rant. Like, if you want to know like personal experiences, I've had a bunch of past life regressions that had to do with, all kinds of like the Lemurian, Atlantean timelines, all kinds of like Sumerian timelines, Egyptian timelines, out the asshole, like so many Egyptian timelines. It's just ridiculous. Come to find out, really, it's because Egypt thing was like a long time. It's not really actually just Egypt. It's Egypt and then the culture that they built over, which is called Kemet, which another guy found, and he definitely like is very much so a thing that was there. Egyptology didn't like his work. Magically, he ended up being dead, as things tend to go. But there was another culture where Egypt was before what we know as Pharaonic Egypt was ever there, generally referred to as the Kemetic culture. They operated in many of the same ways, similar pantheons, some crossover to Sumerian pantheons. You could do a whole 57,000 shows on Kemet. That's where alchemy comes from. Chem, right? Like alchem, right? So, yeah. Anyways, let's see. Yeah, lots of regression. I naturally have dream states that are what are called flash forwards. You could call them like premonition dreams. More often than not, when we discern them as like a flash forward, it's because they're premonitions of completely worthless stuff. They generally point to a point in time that actually becomes influential, but the experience that is had is not directly influential, meaning like the thing that you would want to know didn't actually happen in there. The thing that you would want to know happened 2 weeks after the dream that you basically had. Love your articulations. The flow of energy within which you speak continually finds resonant with profoundly nuanced places within me. Love seeing you be you, bro. I love you too, Aaron. Thank you for helping me provide the space for that. And hopefully everybody feels like they can come on here and be them. Let's check in and see whether Will's ever going to come. He has not responded to me. Will might be scared away. That's life. Yeah, Cam. Yeah, me and Arya spent some time talking about Cam. She's very she's tapped into Egyptian timelines for sure. Arya has very interesting experiences. Hopefully someday she'll come on here and talk about those things. Nina has flash forwards. That's fucking dope. If you have flash forwards, then you are a specifically trained dreamer. You've been working with dreaming for an extremely long time, and you will have actually really good results inside of it. You will they're technically not random. The question of whether or not you can actually put together correlation with what you're seeing is debatable. So to try and explain this, right? Like so, a wave gets created by a thing that happens, right? And it waves through reality, right? And then there's a point at different, you could catch that at any point that it was to happen, but the thing that actually happened is right here, right? So a person who flash forwards will oftentimes end up landing like somewhere over here. So they're already catching wind of the energy of the thing. It is technically the same waveform with which it will happen inside of reality. Is this the right way? No, this is the right way, but it's actually before it. What is basically your consciousness has picked up on a pattern before it has actually ever happened, and so they're not random. There's something that happens around that time, and you can generally, like, a lot of these times these will point, if they point to stuff that happens, well, a lot of times for me they point to, I mean, human life, right? Because flash forward, we're saying that we then experience it. Usually that's the only way that we can really guarantee that it's happened. Otherwise maybe it's like prophetic dream or something like that. We wouldn't call it like premonition based flash forward. So we have to have some proof that it actually happens. So they generally happen with the human life, and as a byproduct of that, they generally point to a point where there's going to be a large flux inside of the life. Something's going to happen, like a relationship is going to change dramatically, is usually what that is. And so it's just kind of a precursor of that. The changing of the waveform is the way that I understand it, and you pick up on that pattern earlier. I have felt my flash forwarding slash seeing is just remembering this blueprint or life that I have been exposed to before living it. Yeah, that. So, are you saying that you felt your flash forwarding, seeing is just remembering this blueprint? Are you saying that you had an experience of, okay, so a time after this where you were looking back on what life was before? Is that, well, that's like so twisty. So so this is, I'm so can you elaborate more on what you mean right here? I'm kind of like having trouble putting it together. It might be because I'm silly. I think that's probably the reason. It seems like this is articulated very well. I'm trying to understand, like, who were you in the time that you were experiencing this? Like, was it you before your current life or you after your current life that was seeing the blueprint of life? I think that's what I'm trying to ask. Yeah. Um, what was the dancing thing, too? What's dancing? I like dancing. Tell me what the dancing thing is. Please. Please. Um, This is not even where I'm trying to be. Alright, epilepsy alert. I'm putting different visuals on the screen, so, you know, if you have epilepsy, maybe turn off your visuals, because they're fractals and stuff. Okay, so, more like our soul has this blueprint. The impact we will make in this life with all the people we will meet. We get to see it before living it. So the seeing is like remembering that reel that was played once before we ever started this journey. Okay. So it's almost like, you know, in a certain way, like to really humanize it. Like you go to a store and you get to like kind of basically check out what the life is, what the item is like before you purchase it or commit to it. And you have a memory, or you had an experience of the memory of seeing your blueprint of your current life before it ever played out. And she says, like the web. Is it like a web? Wait here. If time is amorphous, could it just be like the lines kind of blurred for a sec? Like the web. So as far as that goes, I think there's, I mean, like if you think of like web and you're thinking of gridding, the application of sound to that would mean that like everything actually technically like has a vibration, so it's not really in just one place at a time. It's in all like the places around it. And I really feel like if you want to experience, okay, so I think that we're here simply to experience every single possibility that existence could be, and this is just the portion of it that we're experiencing right now. And thank you all for sharing me with that, and thank you for being at this channel. And if you're watching this in a replay, like and subscribe and come around at 8 o'clock at night so that we can do cool things together and change the world. Thanks, love you. So I think that we are trying to really just see what existence can be, but in order to see what existence can be, we actually have to see it play out at like all different time frames as well. And as a byproduct of that, technically every moment ends up becoming an expression of every other moment that could possibly be, or at least all those things would be in the same place, because there would be some dimensionality that was working at a time frame that would put, say, 1492 to right now, where I am right this moment in 2020, because that timeline, or this timeline, is whatever way that would go. This one's running slower than that one is. So the point is that like they meet at the same time, but by the same quantifying scale, they would be at the same time. Thus meaning that all the times they're in the same place, but through the experience of them, it seems like there are many different times. And so through changing our perception of time, we end up getting into places where we see time break down. This happens all the time with like deep Monroe stuff. I'll bring up this thing over here that actually like shows some of the focus levels. I linked it earlier in the WhatsApp group or something. I don't remember. I put it somewhere. But I'm really just bringing this up so that I can show, which one is it? So if we share this window now, what am I doing? Zach, remember how to use a computer. If we share this, and we zoom in, if we see here on focus number 22, is being noted by being on the border between time and space and non-physical states of being. What this means is that every focus state beyond 22 is a state that resides in, I guess, what I refer to as no time. It's outside of time. Time's not really like a thing. You go wherever you want. That's not a thing anymore. Time is an experience that, like things that are experiencing decay, then they put this definition on something that is happening because they want to know about their decay rate. You're not really actually even experiencing time. So when you get outside of the physical state of being, right, then you get beyond this border of space and time. It doesn't really exist in these states of consciousness. But focus 22 is not really close to the top. This puts up to focus 49. You could go into some elaboration behind this, but really, like, already you're so singularityed out at that point in time. The point of this is that really only like not even halfway up the scale do we see space-time already breaking down. So the perturbations in time come from basically a variance in perception. We see time differently. We experience time differently based off of the way that we see it. And so you can explain through a lot of stories whatever the mechanic is that's causing that variance, or what that variance looks like, whatever helps the person understand it. But functionally, it's that, time is made up, man. It's just it's just a way that you live out things that have to have some lifespan, right? Like it's not actually real. If you're actually like infinite, if you're actually limitless, and you are all that is, right, then like time's not really a thing for that thing. Time's a thing for all of the things that thing makes, right? Because they're all based off of whether or not they're going to be made anymore. That thing's experience is just based off of whether or not it will be making, right? But if it could just make something else, then all these things ran out of time, but it still has all the time in the new world, you know what I mean? So it's completely arbitrary to your perspective. If you get to a deep enough level of focus, you kind of separate from, call it physical consciousness, I guess, which is kind of weird. But when you're outside of that space, disconnected, wholly unattached, that concept loses meaning. The dancing and sending the energy to the ground thing you were talking about, I was doing it. It was great. Couldn't stop listening to old Egyptian pop during it. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, like these kinds of dance is functioning like a doorway to an ecstatic experience as long as you put enough focus into it. And so really for like whether you want to ground or you want to connect to something great, the whole operation of the Sufis was basically utilizing dance, and in their format was mostly spinning or vortexing, to go back to like the psychomancy, to generate an ecstatic state within which they were able to focus all of their attention and have an experience of non-ordinary state of consciousness. Time can be whatever number you set it to. Salvia experience very recently made this quite visceral in my life. I got all freaked out about what was going on. It's interesting. The guy that was supposed to be on the show tonight, I actually had this experience in his truck. But nevertheless, when I came back out of this experience, I was very confused about what time it was, and I didn't really feel like I could trust myself or the people around me, and was just like, oh, I just have to fucking agree with the clock. And so I just agreed with the clock, but in a certain way, this set like an arbitrary point in my consciousness where I know that at least from that point, I've been living in a timeline that was just an agreement to that clock, right? Like the time was at least made up at that point in time because I was wholly confused and just agreed with the clock. So, will you walk us through all the focus levels and elaborate on the ones that stand out to you? Yeah, I would be willing to do that. And make correlations between focus levels and states like astral projecting. Sure. Well, never done this. Let's see how it goes. Which window is it? The one that I have it open in. It's this one. Let's scroll back up here to the top. So if you've ever had like a hypnagogic or a hypnopoptic state, the state right before, I'm not going to cover focus one because focus one is normal, ordinary consciousness. That's where it's, you know, your standard. Right now, I'm awake and I'm just talking to you guys, reading a thing, doing stuff. I can taste something, I can smell stuff. Everything is around normal physical reality. This graph will be good to keep in mind specifically for you, Aaron. Let's make it bigger and get right in on it. So, because you see that, like, as you can already see, like remote viewing is functionally an astral projection. So as we already start to get to this lower part of the scale here, right, we're already in a state where functionally we're having remote viewing experiences. And it's important to understand that, like, from the Monroe mindset, functionally everywhere is an astral projection. Everywhere is astral travel. At this lower level down here, where we're looking at physical reality in the red, you're astrally projected into physical reality. And if you're, you know, daydreaming, you're astrally projected into like a different kind of reality that you don't call completely physical reality. And the difference between all of these is just a different kind of reality, really, that you're projecting into. So focus level one, standard life. We all do it. We all do actually higher than focus one. The reason why focus 1 to 10 wouldn't, there's no reason to cover it inside of this article, is because functionally, like, everybody obtains these throughout their life. Focus 1 through 9, really, unless you like have a problem where you literally have some type of focus disorder. Like if you truly had ADHD, most people diagnosed with ADHD really don't have ADHD. They're just like bad at focusing, right? But since you go to sleep all the time, going to sleep is very much so a process of focusing, but you maybe don't see it that way. You're taking away all of your focus on the outside reality, and you're allowing yourself to go unconscious, right? What does that mean? When you're going unconscious, what you're actually doing is disassociating from your body and your experience in the physical reality, and allowing your mind to potentially, if you are aware of it, move on to something else. Most things would believe that it always moves out to something else. The question is whether or not you bring any of that back. So Focus 1 through 9, this is like, I mean, if you want to feel like focus level like 9, basically, or 8, and have it be very functional, like quite easily, just like take some Adderall. You know what I mean? Like this, it generates that kind of state, right? Like it gets you all zoomed in. People drink coffee all the time because they don't really operate very well in focus level 1. They want to bump it up to like a focus level 3 or 4 to handle all the tasks that they have in their day. I mean, even like driving, you want to be kind of focused to drive well, right? You want to be focused on your work. You want to be focused on what you're doing in all kinds of different ways. So you want a heightened level of focus from that. Really, you want a heightened level of focus from everything, or you want to be able to have the ability to navigate these, basically. So nevertheless, focus 1 and 9, normal reality. If you've ever had like a hypnagogic or a hypnopoptic state, the space right in between waking up or right in between falling asleep, you could basically associate that space right there with kind of like a focus level 10. Although if you're naturally pushing yourself there through like meditative function, brainwave entrainment, things like this, you can be much more conscious about going into this space, because the mind is where the consciousness is remaining here, as we see right here. The physical body is deeply relaxed. We're talking about removing the senses from it, right? Like that's just a relaxation of the body technique. But the mind remains conscious, and if I could continue going all the way, awake and alert, right? Or more easily said, mind awake, body sleep. So when we move beyond that type of situation, we then move into what they have coined this term in very recent days, and they have coined this opened during each human plus exercise. I mean, if you want to buy this stuff and you live in the UK, you can go to the Monroe Institutes UK.org, and apparently they do stuff there. I don't know. The United States Monroe Institute, at least in terms of what its old functionality was, does not exist anymore, and this is kind of just stuff that you need to get on your own. So this has the ultimate communication channel to all levels of awareness, mental, physical, and emotional. This is why we look at this as basically like a deep meditation state. If you go back up to the thing over here, if you've done any formats of basically transcendental meditation where you've taken the time to get into a deeply focused state, a la Focus 10, and then you start asking yourself the questions of basically removing your body, yourself out of that body, and you can do this visually, you can just do this with a mind practice, it doesn't really matter, but the idea is you can do all out or you can do in for both of these. The thing I told you about breaking down the corpus callosum is really just a method of doing this in towards the collapse. You can do it out towards an expansion too. Both formats work. If you start doing that more, you will then end up being in functionally, you gain an objective awareness of the realities within which you are experiencing, which allows you to have a clear communication channel with mental, physical, and emotional experiences that you're having, which are functionally the whole of the sensory experience. The sensory experience lives inside of that stuff. Most of what we would call even intuition is functionally operating like that. We then take anything that's basically beyond this and we downstep it into functionally this place where we're at a place of heightened awareness. And this is why basically this is about collapsing to get into this. I always use it like that because we're collapsing all of the energy and the reality all into one point of focus. And then beyond this, we're going to project that focus at very specific places. The better that we can condense this, the better we're going to be able to project it. But by bringing this all to the center, or by going outside of yourself, you can get two different functions of basically saying, this is what is within my purview. This is what I am holding, right? You're holding it in your mind. And as you do that to a far enough level, you will gain effectively a transcendental objective position on yourself. This is where you start reaching focus levels 11. Getting even farther into that would be focus level 12, which is where you're kind of like at the expanded consciousness. And then inside of this, they say a state of no time. Okay, what they mean by this is that basically in this state, it basically doesn't seem like time is passing at all. It really feels very much so as though you're getting basically like a solid snapshot of what reality is, like it's frozen in time right there, and you're holding the image so clearly in your mind that you're holding this very specific snapshot in time. You're no longer about your physical body, you're about projection into the whole of the experience. But if you've done that in a certain way of expansion or through collapse, whatever way, if you've gotten all the way out or all the way in, you'll basically see what they're talking about here, that linear time is no longer relevant to the experience, right? It doesn't matter whether the things happen over an elongated amount of time or very, very quickly. The understanding of what happened in them is there regardless, is what that means. So this is because you really are at a place where now you have a really heightened focus towards having a clear understanding of all of the possible sensory inputs that could be coming into your life at that point in time. I haven't been looking at chat at all, so after focus 15, I'm going to look at that really quick. It says, saying here, consciousness is now far removed from physical body signals. If you get to this state through meditation, if shit is going on around outside of you, you basically like won't influence with it at all. Recognize that quantum healing hypnosis therapy as a byproduct of that basically lies somewhere in between focus levels 12 and 15. As a byproduct of focus state 15, and you know, like this idea that so if you think you're having a past or future life regression, you're not at focus level 15, because linear time wouldn't have existed really inside of that. It would be experienced as basically an experience that you're having now. When you drop back into one of these, you might make the linear time relevant to it and say, oh, it must have been in the past, it must have been in the future. But in the moment of experiencing it, it will not be in either of those places. It will be now, not later, not before, not after, now. And you will then downstep that through the other focus levels as you drop out of that. And once you get to a certain place, you will discern that there is a reason to apply a linear timeline to that experience. So there is not actually a reason to have it there, because the experience can be had instantaneously, as a state of no time insinuates. And in that space, though, the consciousness is removed from the physical body signals entirely. So how this is affecting you physically and stuff, like you're not actually going to experience that. You can experience a state of no time, very interesting place to purposely navigate yourself towards death. So you can sit in the moment that you died, looking at the person that fucking killed you, or in other lifetimes looking at the person that you killed, and actually live inside of that moment and see what death feels like at the moment that it's really actually happening. That's, I mean, not for the faint of heart, but it's actually very good for making your heart not weigh anything, and you're going to want that in the long run. So let me check chat real quick. This is what we were talking about earlier. He's taking screenshots. Okay, so nobody said anything at all. If you do have any questions as I'm going on, feel free to ask them. I'm fine with popping out to answer that or whatever. Continuing on, we take like a big jump up here to focus level 21. On the very edge of perception of the time-space continuum, mind remains fully conscious and active. Okay, so at basically this place, and as we might as well put 22 in there too, we're really at the place where like time breaks down entirely. And I don't mean like time in the idea of like hours. I mean time in really what you would understand as the idea of cycles, right? Like time can only happen if things are cycling by all calendars. In any way, whether it's the Mayan calendar, which is some type of extensive fractal cycle, or it's like the Gregorian calendar, which is an annual cycle, right? Is based off of the sun going around the earth in Anu, 1 year. So it's based off of that thing. Either way, it's based off of cycles. When the cycles are breaking down entirely, when you're on the space where that is the boundary, that it is no longer going to be a cycle, but rather that everything that could ever happen will only happen once in functionally the most functional way that it can actually happen, then you're breaching beyond basically these focus levels. They say that the focus 23 is a condition in which an individual may find him or herself immediately following physical death. I have been beyond focus level 23. Psychedelics can get you into these focus levels undoubtedly. Focus level 23, I've been beyond this, where I'm positive that I had just died. Well beyond that actually, with psychedelics and such, but nevertheless, I can't prove whether this is true. This is based off of some kind of data, so I can't really cover like 23. But if you're at 23, it will be a penultimate moment, like especially if it's the first time that you've ever gotten there. If you've gotten to places before, if you've gotten, to like, this is one really interesting thing about the Monroe technology. If you've gotten to like focus level 34, 35 or something before, like, it's much easier for you to get back there. And when you're getting back there, you'll see that you do so in like very big steps. Like you'll sit down to meditate, and basically like within a short practice of like 1 minute, boop, you're already at focus 10. In another minute, you're basically boop all the way up at focus 15. In another moment, you're fucking shut down, and you're at a place where basically like you've already like had an experience that this experience broke down, shattered completely away, and you're into something beyond that, because you have a memory of these. So it's just like doosh, 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 like big swaths of these spaces can be covered once you have functionally the muscle memory to be able to do that. I can't tell you whether it's actually after physical death because I'm sitting here in a body. I would agree with this, but I'm sitting in a physical body right now. So the site of Focus 24, a site of non-physical activity generated by simpler, primitive, religious, or cultural beliefs. So when we start to get beyond here, basically, if you want to go beyond focus level 23, you're going to need to believe in magic. If you don't believe in magic, well, I mean, focus level 24 and beyond is going to force you to believe in magic, pretty much. Because especially in kind of like, I guess what you could call the lower beyond that, most of the kind of conscious entities that exist in this kind of space, as we're seeing the site of non-physical activity generated by simpler, primitive religious or cultural beliefs, the expression of major organized religious beliefs in recent human history, these kinds of things like this, like your Christian God, his whole concept hangs out here. He hangs out basically in focus level 25. He's created through the belief that is inside of them, is a very real tap into consciousness, very real thing that can be worked with to get an experience, a very real thing that can teach you very much so how to become the same experience that it is having. But this experience, and realize that like when we're talking about like if you're Christianity, this religion is super supported. There's so many people behind it. Functionally, it's a spin-off of other religions. There's so many people behind. They've done so many things, coming together to church every day, donating their money, donating their time, speaking the word, spreading the word, all of these things. These didn't just create churches and believers in real life. Those people believe in something that is actually existent out there in the consciousness. It functionally inside of this space is more opaque depending on the amount of energy that is projected towards it. It seeks to become more opaque because functionally it's trying to bring itself into existence. So it's trying to get enough light directed towards it that it ends up becoming something that is substantiated. In the case of, like, you see, these end up becoming substantiated functionally through idols, eidolons, eidolons when they're in your mind, idols when you've now brought them into your physical reality. This is the way of these things that are coming from basically these places. They bounce back, right? Like, so through the beliefs that some person or some group of people create and the activities that they end up doing, they create a certain layer of what you could consider an identity. They all worship these identities, so they'll all agree with you that they have created this identity. They'll claim that it is the creator, not that they have created it. But really, that's because they will also tell you that they're going on some pathway to try and meet it, not that they have already met it. So you would expect them to say it's the other way around. They can't even find where the thing is in their own life. So that should be expected. So basically, those cultural beliefs create what you could understand as conscious entities that predominantly live kind of in this space here. So when we get to focus 26, we're saying here are identified certain areas, few in number, containing the structures and knowledge of various highly individual, religious, and other beliefs based on direct experience of self. You could definitely make an argument that Christianity and Catholicism in the modern day have escalated themselves basically to this position, I would say. But when you were originally getting into these, we'd probably be talking more like a lot of religions that don't exist anymore for the most part, like the practitioners of the Vedas and the things that they created would definitely sit inside of this area. And many of, like, if a ton of people believe it, it's probably escalated itself up here. But as it says right here, focus levels 24 to 26 are referred to as belief systems territories and are explored extensively during their Lifeline program. So all the way inside of here, this is everything that is not physical, but you believe in it. Like, you completely believe in it. right? What you can call that source, you can call it the universe. It's functionally whatever your savior is. The reason why they do it in their Lifeline program is because the Lifeline program is all about basically resolving the savior messiah complex inside of the psychology. If you are the messiah, you've come here to save something. If you are if there's a savior complex, you're waiting for something to save you. The messiah is the savior. On the other side of it, you're waiting to be saved. Both of these are a place that are a position of functional conscious disempowerment, and as a byproduct, the Monroe Institute has something that works directly towards that. If you're looking to give somebody besides Monroe Institute money, I work with all this shit too, as you can probably hear, since I've been sitting here ranting about it for the last hour, and I haven't hardly paused for air. Nevertheless, we can work with these things, and we can figure out how to basically disincorporate your deviation from one side or the other, or play with that balance to get an understanding of functionally how you being here are a representation of the Messiah that is here to functionally save yourself, and that will save the rest of the people with it. And this causes a wholeness inside of yourself, and this is kind of the whole focus of getting beyond these spaces. If you believe that there is something outside of yourself, it's going to be really difficult to get to a place where you're focused beyond this specific level here. Check chat real quick. Exactly, flow into the focuses. Speaking of magic, do you feel comfortable talking about any of the occult practices you work through? I'll talk about anything at this point. Like I don't care. Like I'm presenting all information basically openly to the world and encourage all of it to be here, because really the whole point of this entire platform is to ensure that it's not impossible for anybody to get any kind of information. They have somewhere to get it from. So I'm happy to get into that, and undoubtedly it's going to end up coming up regardless. Uh, I might end up touching on it in here, but why I say you need to learn to believe in magic is because basically you need to get beyond a space where there's a something can happen with basically you being the thing that made it happen. There's not something outside of you that was some type of environmental thing or a god or a deity or something else, the aliens, whatever, that's doing the thing for you. And that's basically the realm of magic. Magic, I say all the time, like magic is only magic until you understand how to do it, and then it becomes mechanic. Everything beyond the point of basically focus level 26 is about understand how to use those mechanics. They say that, as you see already probably on the screen, if you can read small enough, that focus 27 is the edge of human thought capacity. We need to learn to basically utilize our logical mind and our creative mind in tandem to generate what is actually true imagination, so that we can generate a set of tools and focus the projection from those tools in a new space that we have created with the most focused coherence to bring down exactly what we're trying to bring down beyond basically this point of the belief system. Instead of being the thing that's on the bottom of the toroid climbing up, you now are going to be the thing that's at the top of the toroid that understands, and this doesn't directly read out inside of these things, but in terms of what you're capable of doing in your own life, how you can interface back down, because you've now made it to the top of this focus or of the hierarchy where you're not putting anything else above yourself. Nothing, you are not understanding anything, everything is standing under you. Right? When you have expanded your understanding to the point where everything is standing under you. Okay, so nevertheless, we have to understand that we are capable of doing things that may be beyond our imagination in order to potentially be able to accept those realities to exist for us. So in a certain way, you have to believe in magic. Do the focus levels also correlate with the 13 dimensions? 13 dimensions are basically a way of basically mapping out a territory, is really what it is. It's really more like a map of conscious space in terms of density. Focus level is really more about focusing your consciousness, your own consciousness, to be able to project it wherever you want functionally. You could then also say that you maximize the entire like density based system, which is what like my 13 dimension system that you're talking about is based off of what I would say is spiritual density, right? It's not really I mean, obviously there is correlations that can be drawn because it's a consciousness concept, but the focus of it is not really exactly the same. That's kind of more about like your experience as a consciousness. It's movement through basically what you could understand to be a matrix, right? It's more like a map of a matrix, whereas this is understanding how to basically take what is really consciousness and use it inside of one little space in a very focused manner. Um, Curious because I feel like I found a type of shamanic practice through witchcraft, and I've been ruminating on what the difference even is. There's not a lot of difference. That's pretty much the answer. I mean, all occult practice literally just it's interesting because occult practice is really practices that are all focused towards self-empowerment, but we do this on different levels. When you start getting to the level where you're a shaman or a witch or anything like that that takes these kind of titles, you've reached a place of confidence where you believe that through carrying out some kind of ritual, you'll be able to have the conscious space or the control over the conscious space to either know what is going to happen or affect what is going to happen. When you're doing that, someone who does not believe in the mechanics that you have will be like, oh my gosh, you're a shaman. Oh my gosh, you're into witchcraft. Oh my gosh, you're a god. That's like, it all depends on the level of thing that you're doing. If you could magically make water turn into wine, they'd be like, oh, you're just like Jesus. You know what I mean? But like, there's people out there that can make water turn into wine. Like, water is an important facet of making wine. So technically, like, water does turn into wine. You just wanted it to happen without time in order for it to be a miracle. But if you could do it without time, which technically in a certain setting you could do with sleight of hand alone, then technically you would be able to do that and then call you like a witch or like your magic or something. The difference between shamanism and witchcraft is absolutely nothing. These are just identities that people put on occult practices that they do not understand. Really, they have their own realms of doing things. Sometimes witchcraft gets lumped in all kinds of stuff that's like druidic magic and various different kinds of, or what you could just call earthen magic, the whole realm of like Wicca and stuff like that. Shamanism has some crossovers inside of that, but shaman really at its core kind of really means like more of a go-between, right? So shaman's kind of more like bridging space or playing mediator for something. So it's like, I don't do the healing, ayahuasca does the healing, and I don't need the healing, you need the healing. But through me doing the shamanic facilitation of ayahuasca, I will allow ayahuasca to help you heal, right? So I'm playing a go-between, a bridge between ayahuasca and the thing that needs the thing. Um, Occult practice is just that practice, and the exercise you can practice whatever sport you want. Absolutely, yeah. It's all about building bodies in a certain way, you know. So if you're trying to build conscious bodies, then and in a certain way you will need to build conscious bodies. The process of learning to get into deeper and deeper levels of focus, the different ways that you can do that, or the tools that you create for yourself, or the tools that you do in this space, will be building formats of ethereal bodies that you may or may not understand that you have right now. um, right, like, do the lines or titles even matter? Uh, do you believe they matter? Yeah, that's a subjective question. If things don't matter if you don't mind, but if you got your mind on them, then they definitely matter. It's just as individual as fingerprints, the way we all do stuff. If you're doing it right, in my personal opinion, if you're being unique, true to yourself, living authentically, following your heart, making sure you're staying aligned with your passions, doing what you want, not allowing yourself to be controlled, not allowing someone to be the person that's going to come and fucking save you, or thinking that you need to spend all of your time trying to save the world so you don't spend any time working on yourself, and so you're actually in touch with yourself, you got a coherent conversation, you're really actually doing the thing, then you will be an expression of individuality pulled directly from the infinite void of potential that is as individual as your fingerprint, undoubtedly. And if you're doing that, like, you're fucking crushing it. But really, realistically, that is really a lot of work to be truly that individual. We live in a society that very much so encourages you acting like a herd animal. But if you want to be hurt, then act like the herd, right? Like, it makes sense, So nevertheless, like, you have to choose your own sovereignty. You have to choose to be the individual that you are. You have to choose to make the right choices for you. You have to not believe that somebody else has more context over your fucking life than you do. That's absolutely impossible. There's no way they have that. So whatever kind of practice that tickles your fancy. It doesn't matter whether it's science or spirituality, occult or mainstream. Really, it doesn't matter. You can learn about the entirety of the universe by contemplating a rock if you choose to do so through that metaphor set. If you choose to expand that metaphor set, that is fine too. So it's just what you want to do, man. That's the coolest thing about all this is this. It's like with the focus levels, like it's just to do what you want, man. Like it's just not. It's really not that hard. Nowness and intention is the goal of practice, right? I Yeah, I mean, sure, like focus. I say focus. Focus you could call nowness. Like for me to be very mindful and conscientious of my current moment, I need to be very much so in a state of presence, nowness. I need to not be worried about what I'm going to say in 5 minutes or what I need to do in 10 minutes. I need to be worried about what I'm going to say right now. I need to not be worried about the last question I was answering or the question I'm going to answer next or what's popping up in chat while I'm reading this. I need to be focused on answering specifically your question so I can be present with you and answer specifically your question and tell you what I actually think about that and actually have a relationship with you rather than being not in that. So if my intention is actually to be present and focused in my space, then inevitably I will experience nowness or presence or whatever the hell you want to call that. It doesn't matter. It's a requirement of focus. Yes, agreed. Our mind makes things matter. Haha. Love the way you conceptualize energies. Yeah, I mean, but this ain't just conceptualization of energies. This is fucking scientific fact right here. As a byproduct of something that functions very much so like a mind coming into basically an implosive collapse, things end up in a reality where they believe that they hold a physical space and have things that are like mass, things like this. They come into the temple to hold mass. These kinds of things. It's not a mistake that there's crossovers inside of these words. Mind your own matter and make what you put on your mind matter. Absolutely. Yeah, be conscious about what you're doing and put all of yourself into it, and then it's totally worthwhile. So Aaron loves that, laughing at each other. I love all of you. I'm going to take another short little pause now that we are right at the edge of human thought capacity. Like 5 or 10 minutes to drink water, clear my throat. It's kind of raspy. And then I'll be back and I'll go through the rest of these and whatever comes up because of that. If you are catching this on replay, like and subscribe. Follow us on social media channels. Thank you for being here. I love you. Be a part of the movement. We do lots of cool things with lots of cool people, and we'd like to also incorporate you if you would like to be a part of it. We will be back in just a moment. Thank you all for being here. Okay, I am back. Um, yeah, as far as the more than 27, there's more than 27 on this list. As far as what Gary says, I would agree with this. I don't really think there's a limit on this system. There's what we've explored. Even what you're seeing in this right here is in a certain way someone's arbitrary separation of what this experience really is. Arbitrary logical separations like this really just help us to map something so we can wrap our logical mind around it. The thing that we're really talking about inside of this thing is well beyond the logical mind. Like, it's all of your intuition, all of your logic, all of your creativity, all of your imagination. Is all of that and one and more things that you actually can't imagine right now. We don't really have a word for them. They're beyond what we would call imagination. So, as far as how many focuses there are, I mean, as many as you want to fucking put numbers on, really. But the system that they already have here provides us just some way to do that. These are all just tools. At the end of the day, it's all just like some kind of tool to give you basically an understanding. Um, I'm sure Aaron's already gone. He's fine with his thing. Uh, I love you too. You're welcome for doing stuff. Um, If Gary wants to explain the rest for me, I mean, like if he knows anything about Monroe, if you're still here, you can come on here, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I sure as hell don't know everything. I've really, like, I heard about it when I was younger, read their stuff, worked with some people who had worked with them a little bit, but mostly I was left to like my own devices, just having a big interest in it. So I'd love to talk to anybody that knows more about it. If if you do know more about it, let me know. As far as now it's interesting because like I was Aaron specifically asked for this, but we'll do it anyways. He can just watch the replay. He'll watch the replay tomorrow anyways. So we're talking about now the edge of human thought capacity, the site of a way station for rest and recovery from the trauma of physical death. So this place right here is oftentimes when you're at really what is like the peak experience of when a person thinks that they're kind of the center of everything, or something that you could call like an everythingness, where all the stuff that you could possibly consider maybe thinking at the same time is all being thought at the same time, and you are completely aware of all of those thoughts happening in your sphere. Oftentimes this is projected visually as a toroid, and my own personal space is very much so just a white toroid that really doesn't have anything going on. It's just a lot of shit spinning around real fast, and I use this as basically a way station where inside of that, progressively from here, is really, in a certain way, you could look at it as maybe you're not even changing focus level, but you're just like navigating a big plane in a certain way. And there's lots of places you can go, and like the further you got from that center, you would, maybe you're having a farther experience, or you could call that more up if you want. In this system, we've already been going up, so we keep talking about going up. But this is basically what you could kind of understand as a center point. If you thought about, now you're in like okay, so like if you thought about yourself as a toroid, right? Like your body was in the middle of that, and it's swooping down inside of that, right? Like it's like an apple, and you're inside of that. But outside of that, there's another of this happening, basically, right? And so when you're in, so you're at some kind of way station that's basically now in another middle, right? Because by getting completely out of this thing, you've gotten halfway up the next harmonic, if that makes sense. I mean, at least that's the way that I think about it. So now you're at basically this new way station. This way station is transcendent to your physical human experience, right? So everything that you're going to basically experience beyond here seems basically like beyond human, right? But inside of this space, many people have used it they use this as like a healing space of like a lot of people can get themselves to this space. And actually, like after this, I'm going to edit out to talk about something that I was thinking about while I was taking a break. But a lot of people can get themselves to this place pretty easily, and this is where they do their energy healing from. The reason for this is they basically utilize the energy that they are feeling inside of that space, and then through whatever kind of methodology that they have designed, there's literally as many as there are people out there that feel like they do this because they just like whatever occurs to them, right? It's based off their symbol set. Some people like to have light wands. Some people like to envision light filaments going out to other people. Some people like to be projecting orbs or like whatever. It doesn't really matter. At this point in time, it's really just like your choice. It's really the intention getting carried, and then you're just making some type of visualized metaphor of it. If you are taking the time to even do that, that's not necessary. But nevertheless, a lot of people want to have a visual experience. Seeing is believing, so they create a visual experience for themselves as they are experiencing energies. Nevertheless, so this place is oftentimes used as basically a healing location, but it's also kind of a place where everything that's going to come out of here is basically all trans physical experience, right? Entirely. And you might think that like, so you think that like maybe like a god, right? However it's perceived in some type of religion is like trans physical. Well, if he was trans physical, he really wouldn't be fucking interested in humans whatsoever, right? Like he's obviously interfacing with the physical dimensions. If God can have any interface directly inside of your life, then God is interfacing with this dimension, and thus is obviously in some capacity physical. So at this point in time, you have gone beyond the concept of something that would be a physically interfacing kind of God or something like that. This isn't saying that you're becoming a god. You've kind of gotten rid of the concept of God now. Like that's not really a thing anymore. You're more like basically a space of pure consciousness that's now understanding its ability to navigate freely and then project itself into some kind of experience. And at the moment that you're projecting in that, you kind of know that you're God, but like really like you're shooting into something wherein you are a projection of God, and then you seek getting back out of it basically. So in here we say focus 34, 35, the area of the gathering. Beings from many other locations within the physical universe are gathered here to witness the upcoming Earth changes. So in basically these spaces beyond that, people have encountered a whole slew of entities. There's like, I mean, John Lilly himself has like a huge, basically, I guess you call it a dossier on all these different places that he was getting to these deep focus levels by using basically sound, ketamine, and float tanks. And he was using all of these at the same time, and meditative and breathing techniques inside of that to as well, to basically get super deep level of focus. And traveling beyond functionally focus level 27, he was interfacing with a whole different slew of conscious entities that he was identifying. Now, other people have gotten consistent anecdotal agreement that these things were there. If they are there, they must be highly consciously focused, and they're probably operating from a similar level of focus that you are. So they're like, are they really that? I don't know. Do they, if I was to be in that space and I see what I could maybe perceive as something alien, right? Would it see me as like what I am right now, or as what it wanted to see me at? I don't really know. But inside of this kind of idea of beyond these kinds of places, then so your heightened consciousness is beyond physical experience, but it's still disparate, right? Like there still is stuff around, right? So to move beyond this, we generally start getting into places where that starts to then recoagulate basically into smaller and smaller amounts of things. And that's why when we start getting into these kinds of, all the levels above that are basically different segmentations of these people, whatever you're experiencing here, coming into basically groups that break down their function based off of their identity, and their identity is really just a byproduct of their agenda. You might attach names to them, you might attach images to them, you might attach sounds to them, crafts, any kind of thing. You can attach anything with them. Any of these ideas of something that would be like, well, in your conceptualization of like an Arcturian, is that thing more powerful than what you conceive God to be, or does that sit beneath it? What if there was something that sat above that thing, and basically like whatever you conceptualize God to be was really functionally kind of like its plaything? What would that thing be? Would it be a god? Not if there was like many of them. If there was just as many of them as there were humans on Earth, they wouldn't perceive themselves as God. They'd just be at a completely different layer of consciousness, You know what I mean? So you start recoagulating between there. At the lower focus level, it's really done better. The way that it seems to happen more is in basically another collapse, right? Like all of these things are seen because you're already at a space where you're like, oh, I've already seen this. Like everything came back together. So everything comes back together, and then you're seeing how there's many back togethers, right? And this is why he ends up saying there's infinite amounts, okay? Because you can always take what is together and make it disparate, and then basically recoagulate it above it, and then break it out again, and then recoagulate it above it and break it. And you can do this forever. If you want to add different delineations to each and every one of those, that is a thing that you can choose to do. Or you can just kind of surf around in like the sea of consciousness and see what's out there. So that's, I mean, now, okay, since I realized that this was really close to done. Now, what I was thinking about while I was away, uh, these kinds of situations below, like all the way up to like focus level 22, especially, sometimes people just randomly snap into these because of near death experiences, especially with like focus level 22. Think of the idea of someone having basically like, you may have heard of an experience of like a car wreck is about to happen, and the person that was in it, like time slows down, or maybe even in the case where they could see themselves from outside of their body as the thing happened. This is really just because in that moment that the impact is about to happen, they get really focused on what is happening, right? So these things start to break down like that. The interesting carryover of this though is that says that even without like some kind of inductive meditative state, it would be possible for us to just like snap ourselves to that if we were capable of managing our focus in such a way that we could really focus just instantaneously. Maybe we would actually be able to be like a situation where a ball is flying at my face. I purposely really focus, and because of my experience of time, I'm experiencing it traveling slower, giving me time to move out of the way, right? Or maybe with something faster. The whole point is that really the time that something's traveling to you is really a byproduct of your perception. And it seems that it's possible for us to actually go beyond that perception of time, even just in a snap instant, if we really feel like we need to. The question is how to like train yourself to just be like, all right, I need it, and then you have it. I don't know. That sounds pretty difficult. From uh, the secret of the universe is 42. It actually comes from the Melchizedekian priesthood, which has a whole lot of their own methodologies. Which, realize, to my mind, every single methodology on the planet that you could possibly have is actually a way of pretty much explaining this, what you're trying to do with this. This is just like simplified to like, no, I'm trying to focus more. You know what I mean? And I can just say that, and that's kind of the whole of the message. The Melchizedekian priesthood, again, another like occult practice. They have rituals. They have ideas. The whole idea of like the Merkaba comes out of that. The 42 correlations, there's a lot of them. I definitely couldn't do all of them. Immanuel Kant, he may have said something about it as well, but I know that this gets attached to the Melchizedekian priesthood all the time. Like, this is something, if we wanted to, we could dig into it more on stream. I don't know like a shitload about it. So yeah, he said it's the answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything. So I would have like my own interpretation of this, and but I don't know that that's what this person meant, really. So it's such an interesting premise to the book, though, that like some supercomputer figures out the answer, but no one remembers the question. I don't know. In a certain way, like with the Melchizedekian priesthood, very much so believes in this number. It's correlation to basically DNA. Well, like some correlation to chromosomes, and that we're like kind of in a progressive process of evolution where we gain more and more chromosomes, and we're not really like that. We're not at an ideal spot. It's something to do with that. Um, your interpretation to life, universe, and everything. I basically look at everything as a byproduct of four-way wave conjugation. But that process of wave conjugation basically creates a doubling effect because everything is traveling inside and out at the same time. So when I look at, like, if I'm looking at 42 in the context of it's the answer to everything, then it's basically that I have four paths, right? I have a horizontal path and I have a latitudinal path, but these are coming together both with this traveling up and down and with this traveling both these ways, right? So it's like there's 4 points to the system, but there's two modes of travel entering each point, right? Because both things are going both ways. So it's like a 4 by 2 system, and this is functionally how the 4 becomes 8. And this is the whole idea in a certain way, a certain line of belief behind the idea of the swastika is that, like, when something comes into coherence as a cross, right? What that inevitably does is creates another space that spins, right? Or you could understand it as the Hartman and Curry grids on the Earth, right? We have the Hartman grid, which goes like this on the Earth, and we have the Curry grid, which goes like this on the Earth. And that's also kind of showing the same thing. It's also recognized that the Hartman and Curry grids, the ley lines, where those cross in major places, are understood as vortexes. They're understood as vortexes because energy can be perceived as spinning in those places. When the 4 is really operating in the doubling function, when it comes completely into conjugate, it generates a space that is stuck in what is functionally a spin, right? The illusion of spin exists inside of there. That really creates like the possibility for everything. So it's really the doubling up of 4-point systems that creates kind of this movement to 8 that generates the spin. The swastika is the same thing. It's a broken cross, which basically gives the cross 8 exterior points. And the swastika in a certain way can be looked at as like the explanation of a whole valence shell, or what you would understand as a noble gas. A whole valence shell, when it's drawn in like scientific notation, you put like, say, neon, right? Like we would put Ne in the center of it, but then the outside valence shell of it would have 2 electrons drawn as dots, 2 electrons drawn as dots, 2 electrons drawn as dots, and 2 electrons drawn as dots, because a full valence shell is 8 electrons. And in a certain way, you could then map a swastika from the center over the top of that if you were so inclined, right? Because it's really just indicating that something is in a symmetrical spin. And so 4 by 2 becoming 8 for me is the whole reason why there's actually a space, what is actually a negentropic 0-point unity as a byproduct of perfect phase conjugate implosion. This creates a space in which something can happen. Like outside of that, there's not actually happenings, there's potentials. But that is what creates a space for a possibility or for existence. So it's the secret of the universe, because the universe wouldn't have a space to exist without the function that lies behind the number. So that's why. And yeah. Maybe this was Douglas's inspiration. Is all getting along the same thought pattern. We are but turning it to a fun fiction. Maybe. I mean, he's definitely postulating something very interesting when he's going, basically with this idea that, like, if the answer to the question of what is the importance of the universe went on long enough, but something had been set to solve it that, like, wasn't ourselves, would we really actually even care what the answer was when we got it, or would it just be like some answer and we had no idea what it was even really asking? You know, it's a very interesting look at perspective because of that. I mean, again, it's like that mind and mattering thing, right? Like that number, to the people who found it inside the book, like, it technically doesn't matter because their mind doesn't know what the relevance of the number is. And so going down the same, this is kind of, I mean, mind, matter, that whole thing can be explained by phase conjugation too, if you feel like taking the time to do it. But it's like this, it's the same story over and over again, like it really is. So if you really want to like deep dive on that shit, Dan Winter is the dude. He's got all the math, he's got all the equations and the scientific graphs and the gifs and the lectures and the course materials and everything on the planet. I'll put his name in chat. He's got stuff on YouTube. This guy's already done like enormous amounts of work. Flameandmind.com is one of his technologies. Therify.net is another one of his technologies. These are basically using the idea of phase conjugate optics or plasma physics in some way to generate healing or a better understanding of the self. Then he has a website that has basically all of his scientific data, which is called fractalfield.com. I think it's .com, might be .net. All of these websites, like literally, like the fractal field website, it take you like your whole life to get through. There's just so much stuff. Yeah, what does matter is free food for all, full circle. Yeah, if you're watching the replay of this, we're undertaking a large product to make sure that we can get food from farmers who want to make sure that people are eating it to people who want to make sure that they're eating food. And we want to do that as a nonprofit that is doing that for free and for no money. So if you are interested in actually living in a world where our land is used to generate food that the citizens who live on the land can eat for free, then join a part of our movement, because we're going to make that happen. If you just want that, well, you're going to get it anyways, because it's going to happen. So you should just join and like and subscribe and all the things. If you guys don't have any more questions, I'll probably be done for the night. I've done a lot of talking, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them before I go. I really appreciate everybody who has been here tonight. You guys are super wonderful. It's always so nice to talk to all of you. So I'm sorry if I'm not looking at the camera sometimes. You'll have to know that I also have my computer right here, and I'm oftentimes like looking at stuff on the stream and chat and other stuff like that. Yes, sustainability. We have the technology that everybody could just be eating. Like literally, it's ridiculous. Almost like I could show a video. Well, it's okay. If you want to see a very, very heart-wrenching video about the state of America, you can go just search for Shad Sullivan, and likely you will find many viral links of a video that came up. And he's actually, he is a farmer slash rancher that lives in the central United States, and like he's literally experiencing these kind of things. There's farmers out there that are literally having, like dairy farmers, like the dairy, they're literally throwing out milk all over the place because they simply, like, there's no reason to have the production lines open in order to put it into things that go out to schools, because schools are closed and they're just like throwing out milk, right? Like, and even if like milk is a bad thing, we shouldn't be like I agree, poor cows, your whole life is to get milk, but we don't want to get their milk and then throw it away. That's even worse. Like, we got to not do that. You know what I mean? We got to get the fucking logistics in place to have some fucking supply chain here to get that to people. There's plenty of food. Like, there's a lot of food out there that's getting thrown away. There's so much shit that's getting wasted out of grocery stores. Grocery stores could get on board with this. They throw away so much shit. They could just give it somewhere else instead. Then we deliver it to somewhere local that day. It's really actually quite fucking ridiculous that we live in a first world country that has this much money, has this much potential for prospering, and we literally don't do this. Like, there's so much open land. We need to do the right thing with it. We need to set up the supply chain logistics. We need to educate ourselves. We need to do things. Thank you for being here and being part of the movement. I love you all. I will see you later. Thanks for stopping by. Back tomorrow. Bye, 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 bye.